And Dan, you have to leave at 1:30 today?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll need Holly to join us at some point just to make sure we have a quorum and we can continue business. But why don't we get started with the three of us, board members in attendance, or let me, Rob, I'll let you turn the camera on.
Heron is going to take care of the recording today, and she has just started it.
Okay.
Yeah, recording is started.
Okay, awesome. So board members in attendance, Laura Sibilia, Dan Nelson, and myself. Brian is absent today, and Holly is expected shortly, but we're going to kick off the meeting at 12:05. Christine, do you want to run down staff present?
Yes, staff present. We have Tony Clithero, Aaron Herzog, Rob Fish, Lucy Rogers, and Stephen Zubkov. Did I miss anybody? Not hearing
Excellent.
any. Think I got
Okay.
it. And also,
Christine,
Clay-
what we should do, Christine, we should do for the September meeting is have on the agenda, meet new staff. So Chance and Steve, anybody that we haven't met, we should have an opportunity to say hi to them.
Okay, great. I should also tell you Clay Purvis has joined us as well from the NTIA.
Okay, great. Fabulous. Hey, Clay.
Hey, how are you?
Good. All right, first item up on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda anybody would like to make? All right, seeing none, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the agenda as provided. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carried. Second on our agenda is approval of 3 sets of board minutes. I'm going to make a proposal that we approve the entire slate, June 12, July 18, and July 28. Is there a second to that motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I just want to check one thing here. And it is, the thing that I wanted to check is from the June or July 18th minutes.
Okay.
Items 7 and 8. And those were the motions to approve the NEK and the Maple grants. And with both of those, we included that they would be subjected to, for the NEK, VCBB policies, including future policies, and for Maple, subject to it being consistent or subject to VCBB current and future policy. So I believe it was our intent for those to be the same. I just want to double check in with the board that they feel that language reflects the same thing in both.
What page is that on, Laura, in the PDF packet?
15.
Get there. I agree with you. The intent was to have that language be consistent for both.
I think it is consistent, but it's not exactly the same language. That's the question for me is, do we understand that to be the same thing, or do we need to play the tape?
I'm just reading right now. In reading that, to me, it is consistent with the future policies. I think it's fine. Does anybody Dan or maybe Tony. Tony, do you have a concern with that language?
Thank you, Patty. Actually, I do have a concern with the language that applies provisions retroactively, but that's that's maybe a separate issue.
Yeah,
See,
that's,
Holly has joined us, but in terms of what the motion was made, the motion made on the floor and voted on was to reflect future policies, and both NEK and Maple agreed to that provision.
Correct, and I do not have an issue with the consistency between the two of those,
Okay,
but I
all right,
thank
thank you. All right, we'll leave the language as listed in the minutes as provided. All right, anything else? Any other changes to minutes? And Holly, we're on item 2 of the agenda, which is approval of the minutes for June 12, July 11, July 18th, and July 28th. And a motion and a second is on the floor. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the minutes as provided, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carry. Okay, third on our agenda is State of Vermont Emergency Board decision regarding match appropriation. Christine, do you want to kick this off for us?
Yes, I'm happy to. The emergency board met. The emergency board has been set up for emergency like the flooding we had. And there are 2 members from the House, 2 members from the Senate, the governor, and they reallocated $20 million to emergency flood spending out of our match program, which we actually don't have any necessarily say in the matter. But at the same time, they did inform us that they would, promise to get it back to us in the next budget adjustment. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Will representing the administration to talk more about it. Will, do you have a few words to say about it, or is?
Sure, yeah, Christine, I can just get into a little more detail about how you pretty well summarized what happened and about what will happen going forward, and then be happy to take some questions as well. So, yeah, the only thing I would amend to Christine's description of the emergency board is that it actually meets twice annually just by statute, and regardless of emergency, to evaluate basically a mini budget adjustment, but with very limited scope, in that the emergency board cannot make new appropriations. They can only shift from existing appropriations to other sources. So in this case, they were not able to simply create a new $20 million appropriation to support flood relief efforts. They had to draw it from somewhere. And they did see the match program initially set up for NTIA, but including language for other federal programs, to be the most expedient use, which I know, may appear inconvenient. However, they put some safeguards in place in order to ensure that that money will be coming back come January. Specifically, they passed a resolution stating that the Commissioner of Finance and Management will include the $20 million in the BAA, the budget adjustment proposal, on behalf of the governor. And we are going to, we carry out, Finance and Management carries out the directives of the emergency board as if they were statute passed by the legislature and the governor, which, as Christine mentioned, the board is composed of leaders from those bodies and is chaired by the governor. In terms of our ability to follow through on this, we are very confident that we'll be able to do so. The consensus revenue forecast that we're working off of for the BAA had $78.4 million of surplus at our disposal. So we are actually, for the BAA construction, operating under an assumption of only 58 because we are taking this 20 million off the top as the first measure for BAA included in the governor's proposal. And that 58 will be in addition to carry forward from FY23, in addition to some funds that ended up at FY23 that miscellaneous essentially. So That's where we're at. Finance and Management has a directive to include this 20 million in the BAA. We'll be submitting that BAA right when the legislature convenes in January. And then, well, I haven't been around for too long, but my understanding is that generally the BAA is passed in the month of January, or is intended to be passed the month of January, and then carry on until February and March. But so that's what I would say. Is probably where the greatest or only risk at this money really lays is in the BAA period in the legislature. And even then, I don't know, I wouldn't say that there's a large risk of this money just because the legislature surely aware of, how much value can be reaped by putting forward federal match. But that's now I'm just getting into the realm of, speculation. So I'll leave it at that and be happy to try to address any questions you have as best as I can.
Okay, Laura. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Will. I actually have a question about the other 10 million that was transferred. What was that? What fund was that transferred from?
Other 10 million.
Yeah, so there was 20 million to the Emergency Gap Assistance Program, and then 10 million to the Emergency Financial Assistance Program for flood impacted Vermonters.
So was that from ARPA capital projects? I'm going back into the meeting here, into the minutes here.
It's transfer up to 10 million of 35 million that was appropriated in 2022 Acts and Resolves number 185 G 600A2.
I'm going to have to follow up with you, Representative Sibilia,
Okay.
to make sure I get it correct, because I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
Okay, I guess my question is just wanting to make sure that we still have 10 million of the 30 million is still at the VCBB. That other 10 million was from, and I apologize, it's a quick, I hadn't caught this before the meeting.
No, it's okay. I can go back and I'd like to go into the statute and draw exactly where this is coming from, so I get it correct. So it might take me just a second. But maybe I could address Holly's questions in the meantime.
Yeah, and then I have others also.
Okay.
You're muted, Holly.
You are on mute, Holly.
I could defer to you, Laura, so that you get your
Oh,
questions in.
Thanks.
First.
What other funds were considered for this program? Do you know?
To draw down on for flood relief?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know really any of the thought process that went into the governor and the money chairs making their decision. Certainly I was aware that this was a potential source, but I'm not aware of any other potential sources that were considered.
Okay. And are you aware, well, I'm aware that the governor's budget adjustment proposals, I think, are never passed exactly as he presents them. So do you feel extra confident for some reason about the administration proposing the return of these funds? Is there some additional, rather than, just a regular government administration proposal?
I would say no. I feel confident based on surplus funds that we will include this in the proposal. Like, as I mentioned, this is right at the top of the list for what we've included so far. But as for what the legislature will do with it, I really don't want to speculate. I'm not confident as to anything as to what the legislature would do with the BAA that the governor puts forward.
Okay, Patty, I am interested in understanding what, if any, other funds were considered. I recognize we're still dealing with the aftermaths of a flood. Certainly these funds are necessary and were necessary for relief for Vermonters. For me, it's just a sense of were there other places that were considered and why was this place chosen? So if we could have that information as a follow-up at some point.
I can try and follow up on that, Representative Sibilia. I'm not sure what I can find, but I certainly will look into it.
That would be helpful, Will. And if you can address the findings to Christine so it can be shared with the full VCBB, that would be helpful.
I'm happy to do so.
Okay. Laura, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I just want to double check from the communications that we've received. It appears to me that the Commissioner Tierney was the one that determined that these funds would be available. Is that correct, Christine?
I wouldn't make that assumption. I think she relayed the information. But I think the decision came from the board itself.
So I'm, okay. Who determined that these funds were available? It's my sense from the communications that that was the Commissioner. Was that you?
No, I don't have say in the matter.
Yeah.
I think again, I don't think June has say in the matter either.
Okay. Okay, Patty, I think I'm done. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Holly, you're up.
I just wanted to note that the email that was shared with us between June Tierney and Executive Director Hellquist regarded not consent to use of funds, but impact from use of funds. So I'd like to go back to you, Christine, and ask, does this reallocation of funds in the short term until they're replaced impact the work of the VCBB at all?
No, it does not. We will need these funds as a match for the BEAD program, and we don't anticipate needing those funds until the middle of 2024.
Okay, after the legislative session.
Yes.
Yeah. And so now, Will, I turn to you and ask just a pedestrian question. This funding came from ARPA, and it was for a specific purpose. So I'm just confused how state government can reuse federal funds that were congressionally designated for a specific use and replace them later. But maybe this is something that goes on all the time, and I'm just not aware of it.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to remember whether specifically this 20 million actually came from ARPA.
So that would be part of the question that you're answering for Representative Sibilia.
Well, I think it's a bit of a separate question because we're dealing with a couple different appropriations that that the emergency board drew down on. So addressing the 20 million that came from the VCBB, that was state funds. That was not ARPA.
Okay.
ARPA funds, can be, I think, can be reappropriated, but to my knowledge, the legislature and the governor have been pretty stringent about making ARPA appropriations and leaving departments to manage them. Now, since it was mentioned, Representative Sibilia, to go back to your question about an additional 10 million that the emergency board drew down for flood relief. So if you were asking about the 10 million from section G600A2, so that actually was something that went to PSD proper, that went to Efficiency Vermont for weatherization incentives. So that would be, so I really think that the only money that was, tangential to the Community Broadband Board here would be that 20 million in general fund, which was appropriated for federal matches. Full stop.
Okay, thank you, Patty. So Patty, I am interested in hearing what other, since both of these came from PSD, what other agencies or sources of revenue were considered and why this one was selected. Again, recognizing that we're in the middle of an emergency, and so that may take us a bit to get that answer, but I would like us to get that answer, actually.
Yeah, I'm happy to try to investigate that. Representative Sibilia, definitely looks like, yeah, PSD proper had some had some drawn down from their appropriations as well. But I can look to see if other departments, other programs were considered in order to inform your thinking.
Okay, thank you. Will, my questions center around two things. One is, certainly we all understand and recognize that this, Vermonters are struggling to get out of difficult times with the flood. There's no doubt that emergency funding needed to happen. My questions center on whether the funds that were withdrawn from VCBB trigger any sort of federal reporting requirements. In my understanding, they're ARPA funds. And if we've used those funds we've basically repurposed those funds, do we need to make any reporting information to the federal government from this action?
I would say no, because the money that the state drew back, the emergency board drew back for flood relief, was state funds from the general fund. Definitely, if we were in calendar year 2024 and you had your BEAD program underway and we're needing match funds, then I think that your concern would be really one of great urgency. But considering as that program hasn't really rolled around yet and those matching funds aren't need to be drawn upon yet, and that they're state funds exclusively, that federal reporting requirements should not be that great a concern to the Community Broadband Board.
Is there somebody in state government that can check on all this for us? I don't know who to ask that question of. To me, it feels like we have repurposed dollars. I understand that it's been pledged to us and that there's a promise in the future to pay it back. But to me, it feels like we have repurposed dollars. And I just want to make sure we haven't overstepped here. And if there is some sort of reporting requirement, that we're aware of that. So if you can add that to your to-do list of check finding.
Patty,
And
can
Holly-
I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
So your question, since Will has stated these are not ARPA funds that were repurposed, your question is, since we've represented to BEAD programs that we have the match, your question is whether or not we have an obligation to alert them to this change. Is that right?
I mean, that's a derivative of the question, but I am not convinced that these are not ARPA dollars.
Oh, I see. You're disagreeing. Okay.
I'm not convinced that they're not ARPA dollars. We're funded. The funding, unless I've missed something completely, our funding is through the ARPA program.
Completely.
So this appropriation was made in order to provide a match to a potential NTIA middle mile program. And for that reason is why we use state funds to make this appropriation in order to not have to draw on ARPA for this NTIA program, which was not an eligible source of match. Certainly if the,
and Christine, you concur with that?
Yeah, yes. Let me see if I can clarify a little bit.
Excuse me.
Yeah, in this,
Excuse me.
what? Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Tony. I just wanted to say that they were originally for the middle mile program, but the legislation was revised to provide a broader match. And maybe I misunderstood what Will just said, but
Yeah, yeah,
that is correct. That is correct.
Let me piece this together though, because I think what happened was because we understood that we couldn't use ARPA funds to match ARPA funds, and there was a consideration for a middle mile program, really required it to come out of the general fund. Now we're also going to apply this to other federal programs. Now, Lucy Rogers, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the ARPA funds can be used to match BEAD funds in the future. So it is possible in the future to use ARP funds as a match, but in the current state, it was general funds. So that's where we are. And when it comes to the match program, when we get into the bidding program, I don't know if I should go here yet, but I think there's some question. I think there's you Patty, you had asked the question and you were starting to head down that path, so I'll just go there. When it comes to the bidding process, where bidders, where there's a bidding process, that's where that match is going to apply. So BEAD requires all a competitive bidding program, and they're considering the value of the match as part of that program. So we're going to need funds, which can come from ARPA, to match the bids from the CUDs. And I hope I didn't confuse things any further by trying to make that clarification.
So rolling off the derivative question that Holly framed, in other words, we've already said we're going to use these dollars as their match in the BEAD program. Have we already encumbered those dollars in any way?
We
In
have
other
not
words, you can't spend a dollar twice. You can't say, okay, I've got it for this purpose over here, and I've committed to use a fund of a pot of money for one purpose, and then take it back and then use it for a completely separate purpose. You have to tell somebody if you're doing that. You got to tell the original person that you've promised those funds to.
While I'd be happy to defer to Community Broadband Board finance here, my understanding is that these funds designated for match had not been encumbered or had actually been ascribed to any given federal program as a match. And I hope that goes to answer kind of your entire question, Patty, because that's why I kind of got at that.
That's the nugget right there, Will. Have we already
Yeah,
encumbered those funds?
My understanding is that the answer to that question is no, that the funds were appropriated to be used for federal match, but had not been prescribed to any one program or another, or any one federal agency at this point in time.
That's correct from my understanding as well.
Okay. So the next set of questions that I have revolve around the promise to pay it back. And certainly understand that the goal here is sometime between January and March of 2024, there'll be the necessary actions taken to make that happen. What happens if it isn't paid back for whatever reason? The funds are unavailable. What do we do at that point?
Well, unfortunately, that would definitely be a question for the VCBB staff to answer. But, from the governor's perspective, from the administration's perspective, I'll say, just to not directly speak for Governor Scott, we intend to pull down as much, if not all, of the BEAD Act funding, which I think was around $220 million of broadband infrastructure funding that the federal government allotted to Vermont. So I think that finance and management will endeavor to both put forward proposals and encourage the legislature to support proposals to support matching funds however possible. As of right now, that includes an emergency board resolution compelling the Commissioner of Finance and Management to include the $20 million in the BAA. As to other sources of matching funds, from our perspective, that would be a matter of putting that forward in BAA, in budget, and supporting it through the legislature, with the best arguments at our disposal. I think that we'd also be open to supporting other proposals to set up, new programs for financing that the VCBB could devise and put forward. But, again, at that point, I think that would really be more of a matter for your staff to explore.
Or is there anything that can be done now to help bolster our ability to get those funds transferred come January to March for the BAA process that you're aware of?
You are on mute, Laura.
Did you ask me, Patty, that question?
Yeah, just given your knowledge in the legislature.
I would say leading into the January session, we could be very clear in communicating with the chairs of the money committees. And my recommendation for that, because we had a bit of a fire drill when we were working to get these funds, is that we maybe be a little bit more deliberate in thinking about how we want to communicate that to them. Maybe this is something that staff could bring back in September or October, and we could have a discussion about, Patty, perhaps you could seek a meeting with the chairs of the committees, with Christine, to stress. But I do think it would be important for us to get a little bit more information. I have additional questions for Christine about the timeline of when we need these. I'd like to hear from the CUDs if they have anything to add. So I would suggest that we keep this on our agenda for the next couple of months with a goal of maybe meeting in November at the latest to deliver some sort of letter and request. I don't know if November's too late, Will, or October, but
I think that a letter to the money committee sounds like a great idea. Again, I don't have a perfect window into the legislature and their leadership, but that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. Patty, the part that has me the most concerned is of we have a promise from the administration to propose repayment of these, but they may propose to repay these and defund something that is a legislative priority, which then sets up a big conflict. So it's navigating that conflict between the administration and the legislature that has me a little worried. So I think good, clear communication from us about quantifying the need, being clear about the timetables and what the use will be, and communication to those chairs. I think this is a lot of money. I know we're used to COVID funds, and so everything seems, small, but this is a lot of money. So I do think it's important for us to be really kind of detailed on this.
Laura, I think that's an excellent suggestion. And Christine, in addition to including it on our agenda, please add it to the parking lot. Letter to the money committees for the BAA process to repay the 20 million to the VCBB. Just so I don't want to lose track of this and we just can't forget. We have so many things.
I already have it in my notes. Thank you.
Okay.
I will make sure it's on the parking lot. Yep.
Patty, I do have one further question when you're done.
Okay, the floor is yours.
And that's for Christine. Christine, right now, based on what you know today, what is the earliest and latest? Well, let's just say the earliest that those funds would be needed.
Yeah, I'll start it up and then I'll turn it over to Lucy to clarify further. But the process is that we are actually going to create a program for a competitive bid that will allow the CUDs and the private telecom providers to bid for areas. This is part of the requirement of the BEAD program. So as part of that competitive bid, one of the items that's part of the scoring is how much match that can be provided. So if we look at the 229 million with a 25% minimum match, that would be somewhere around 52 or 53 million dollars we would have to come up with. But we know we're not going to have to come up with all of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Lucy if you're willing to provide a little more detail on how the bidding process is going to work, when it can be started, when we expect to have those bids in, and what that process is.
And specifically the earliest time that those would be necessary.
Yeah, so I think kind of the simplest answer to the earliest time they would be necessary is April 2024. The process is dependent on a large number of factors, including how long the NTIA takes to review and ultimately approve our application. Like, we're working on the initial proposal. that will kind of present to the NTIA how we're selecting subgrantees, and they have to ultimately approve that prior to us running our subgrantee selection process. So the earliest we could expect would be April 2024. And depending on how that process goes, that should not be taken to be a final indefinite date.
And if I can follow up on that, back to Patty's question, will we have to make any pledges to having these match funds available prior to then?
No, so the match funds come from the subgrantee applicants, so the providers or CUDs who are applying for BEAD, they don't come from the state through the BEAD program. So this money would be money that the state is choosing to use to support BEAD applicants in meeting their match requirement, but it's not something that the state is required to provide.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, Patty. I'm all set.
Thank you, Laura. Good questions. Any other questions of Will? Well, we very much appreciate your time and cooperation and giving us the summary. And if you can follow up on those items that we discussed, that'd be fabulous. And we can add that to our agenda for next month.
Happy to do so. Thanks for the invitation, and please feel free to reach out to me if any more questions emerge.
Great, thank you. Okay, that concludes item 3 on our agenda. The next item is number 4, Lamoille FiberNet construction grant application. Christine, you want to kick us off?
Yes, I'm happy to. We've thoroughly reviewed, and with outside with outside support from CTC, the pre-construction and construction grant for Lamoille. Now, the pre-construction, we're recommending approval of a $1,724,479 pre-construction grant, and these should be separate resolutions from the board. So that $1,724,479 is being used for administration and accountability and design, high-level design or detailed design, I'm sorry. So that's pretty standard with how we've handled the others CUDs. We set up a pre-construction program in order to fund the administrative costs. Lamoille has drawn from that to support their administrative costs so far. This will bring them into the future, and of course, Lisa Birmingham will explain more. And we're also recommending the approval of $9,952,273 for construction. And I will point out that the program they've set in place with Fidium as a partner is significantly less expensive than if they did it on their own. They basically have and Lisa will explain more, but I will explain that, at a $42 million program, if they did it on their own, they would be looking at an average revenue requirement per customer of somewhere around $120, which really they almost have, I would say they don't have a successful business plan without partnering with Fidium at this point. And I'll turn it over to Lisa to take it away with her presentation.
Okay. Good afternoon, folks. I'm going to try and share my screen. Hopefully.
You are successful.
I am. All righty. Let's do this. So thank you so much. We're really happy to be here today. We've been working very hard on this partnership and our universal service plan. With me today are many of my board members who have been at this for over 3 years. Also, Fabian Bourgeois, our construction manager, who's been invaluable in trusting but verifying our plans. And of course, our partner, Consolidated, Eric Garr, is here with us today, and maybe some others from Consolidated to help support the application. So this is on the left side of the screen. You can see the, agenda. I know you guys have a packed agenda, so I'm going to try and go through this relatively quickly, so we can have time to discuss and take your questions. I did want to note before I got started that at the end of the deck, there are 3 additional exhibits. Two of them are already, two of the exhibits summarize what's already in the application. That includes an exhibit regarding continuity, what happens at the end of the contract, what happens in default to the contract, and then also our assessment of the partnership against the risks identified by the auditor. And then finally, a third exhibit, which is a side-by-side comparison of our Schedule D compared to an earlier version that Southern Vermont had used. And that is, while Schedule D is in the application, the comparison is not. So Lamoille FiberNet is 3 years old, just turned 3 a couple weeks ago. We serve 10 towns, all 10 towns in Lamoille County, and our service footprint is slightly smaller than all of the counties. So we have agreed and collaborated with NEK Broadband. They will serve the portions of Lamoille County that are served by Hardwick Electric. So that's significant portions of Walcott and Elmore and a little bit of Hyde Park. So as I said, the governing board and folks at Lamoille FiberNet have been working on bringing broadband to the remote areas of the county for several years. And you can see in the top left that the need is great. We range from 20% unserved or underserved all the way up to about 96% unserved and underserved. And even the well-served communities have significant gaps. So you can see in the bottom left, Stowe and Cambridge, 2 of our larger communities, have significant unserved and underserved addresses. So our priority was to get to these addresses as soon as possible with what we could afford while making it affordable for all of our constituents. So we've evaluated several business models, and as Christine mentioned, we had a business model and a universal service plan that we had submitted at the end of last year. We had terrific support and guidance from NRTC. They were a great partner, but as Christine said, it was a high risk, a relatively high risk plan. So this solution that we've come up with, this partnership with CCI, is the best solution, we think. And we think it'll be successful by putting 4 pillars in place. We have first a contract that addresses a number of key issues, construction, maintaining and operating the network, and of course, supporting customer service. We also hope that we'll earn your support and fund the construction, as well as we have local ARPA funds and of course, CCI's private capital. They're investing almost 10 million. And of course, we have existing assets that we can leverage to help make the build more efficient. Our board is a highly engaged board, and you'll see in our Schedule D, as well as some of the contract terms, that we intend to continue to oversee the operations because of our commitments to our communities. And then the fourth pillar is the widespread community support. I hope that you all saw in our application package that all 10 of our select boards support our efforts, and we've also earned support from our state legislators and the Lamoille County Planning Commission. So we hope that today that you'll be able to support our ask for, and Christine, I hope you don't mind, but I'll just let me make a little correction here. The pre-construction grant, the request today is for 1.3 million. We already have, this is a grant amendment, so we have 1.7 available for the project because we still have $355,000 left from the original grant. And then for construction, we're requesting 13.6 million. And as you can see, CCI is putting in 9.8 million for the project that is.
Yeah,
20
yeah, let me interrupt here, because thank you. I just sent a note to Patty that the
Mhm.
numbers I gave were the Otter Creek numbers in the
Oh.
executive summary. Those are the correct numbers, but I agree. Those numbers I said were not correct, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
And I think I need to add one more thing too. We should talk about the
So,
fact that let me
Christine,
just add-
well, Christine, hold on, just to make sure I'm keeping up to date here. So in the executive summary, it's 1.724 million. That's
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
And
Yep.
that's for pre-construction and construction of 13.5.
88, 30. Yep.
That's
Yep.
correct? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep,
The-
which shows on
the-
the agrees with the slider. But let me add one more thing, Lisa, before you go on, because
Sure.
we do need to talk about, I do need to mention to the board that we are transferring, and maybe you're going to talk to this, Lisa, but I want to make sure the board understands that $146,000 worth of materials that were purchased through the original pre-construction grant that was used to pre-purchase fiber, that material is being transferred to Northwest, and that'll go on the Northwest pre-construction cost. And that's the reason for that transfer is because if the board approves of this grant, Fidium uses ribbon fiber rather than core fiber, so that this is no longer needed. So make sure you talk about that, Lisa, as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks. So let me, I'm going to take you through a high level of our updated universal service plan and business plan. The reason we're emphasizing the before and after is we've done a lot of due diligence, and we're not going into this blindly. As I said, we had terrific support and guidance from NRTC. We've also, several of our board members are very experienced. And so it's just important to, given how things are evolving, that, we fully appreciate, the progress, what we feel is the progress that we've made here. So two-part universal service plan. Phase 1 is will serve 86% of our unserved and underserved. We expect that to take 12 months, but we're asking for 24. The total cost for that phase 1 is $25.4 million. I am really excited to say that this is going to deliver broadband to Belvedere, Eden, Elmore, Hyde Park, Johnson, Waterville, and Walcott, 100%. If you remember the first slide where Belvedere, Waterville, Eden, those are all over 80% unserved. So my point here is we are doing the hardest and most chronically unserved first in phase 1. Morrisville, 99% of Morrisville will be done. We identified a short spur that leads into Wolcott recently. So those 5 addresses we'd love to do in phase 1 if we can, but right now it's budgeted for phase 2. We will do roughly 70% of all the unserved and underserved in Stowe and Cambridge, including the chronically unserved areas in those communities. They are mostly RDOF areas. So that's huge progress there. I'll come back to the incentives in a second. I just want to summarize phase 2. So phase 2 is obviously just 14%, which represents about 660 unserved and underserved passings. We're budgeting 5.3 million. I honestly, by the time we get to it, planning for it in 2024, constructing in 2025, I think it will be less. We anticipate funding this through BEAD or other federal programs. CCI has made a similar financial commitment, proportional commitment to building phase 2, but we wanted to reserve the right to partner with another provider if it made more sense, if it was more efficient. So when I look at the town of Stowe and the town of Cambridge, what is left, it's they're isolated within the village networks, principally in Stowe, or up the mountain road to Vale Resort. And in Cambridge, it's up their mountain road up to Smugs. And then one neighborhood in South Cambridge, which you can see in the green. So we're leaving our options open. Let me get to the incentives. I have to say, this is really the hard work of several of our board members who have been working on this, as I said, for a long time. And we wanted to be able to give them some certainty that this was going to be completed. I'm sure most of you have had an experience, whether it's building a house or updating a kitchen, you get 98% there and there's a punch list and it just never gets done. And putting that into the context of finishing out these communities, 2%, it could be 20 homes, which in Belvedere is a lot. So that's 10% of Belvedere. So what we did was our payment structure is slightly different than what was used in Southern Vermont or other construction applications. We have, there are 4 wire centers that are served in, that serve Lamoille County. We'll put up 20% as to start. And then as each wire center is completed, we'll release another 30%. And then at the end, when the whole project is completed, 100%, then the remaining 50% or 7.5 million can be paid. This is also, of course, completion means subject to testing, etc. If a wire center is less than 98% complete, right, the punch list, there is, we've agreed, or Consolidated has agreed, to pay twice the cost to complete those wire centers or $10,000 per passing. That's, we believe, a good enough incentive to not only get CCI to complete, but also gives us comfort that we'll have the funds available to do what we need to do to get the job done. And I have to say, given the success in Southern Vermont that was celebrated last week, we hope that no one will ever have to use this provision. So that is the the summary of the Universal Service Plan. As Christine mentioned at the top of this presentation, this is 30% less than our prior plan. It was $44 million. And it's because the prior plan had a conventional approach where we were going to build a standalone network. And the problem was that we couldn't afford to go any faster. And so we were also building only 179 miles in our first phase. We also had to go get 20 to 25 million in municipal revenue bonds to help finance phase 2. So a lot of risk and not a lot of progress. So we're very happy with the speed and the savings and the risk reduction that this affords us. So in addition to getting broadband to everybody as soon as possible, our board prioritized affordability. And the way we see affordability is 2 things: the price of service and the price of connection. So in the application packet, I haven't put it in here today, but in our packet, we did a survey of all the most of the providers in Lamoille County, as well as surrounding areas, to understand how Fidium's prices were, and they are highly competitive and more affordable than the other offerings um, that are there. They will offer day one multiple speeds and multiple price options for residential and small business services, and will also be 2G capable. So just if you can see the plan to the, the schedule to the right, our prior plan, as Christine mentioned, this was one of the riskier parts about the prior plan. We could not afford to keep our prices as low as Fidium and some of the other providers in Vermont or Lamoille. So I hope you can see that comparison. Fidium is also committed to participating in ACP and other programs as they are rolled out. They've also committed to Lamoille in our Schedule D to uniform pricing. So this assures us that the rural areas, that the folks in Belvedere will pay the same price as the folks in Burlington or Brattleboro. Also uniform product commitments, and this is really important. I'm going to skip ahead to another bullet point on the next slide, but what this means is that we're not going to be left behind. That's what this commitment is about. So not only do we get multiple product offerings day one, but as things evolve and there are new products and services offered, Consolidated has committed to bringing to Vermont and to Lamoille County any services that they offer in Portland, Maine or Nashua, New Hampshire, those high density areas. And they will also pay for the cost of upgrading the customer premise equipment. That's a significant commitment. Many of our communities, such as Belvedere and Eden, have been left behind for a long time. And so this was really important to us. The other thing that makes this a really good deal for us and a better deal than we could have afforded under our prior plan is the extensive drop and free installation commitment. So because Fidium Consolidated is the incumbent, they've got infrastructure in place and drops in place, and they can use that to reduce the out-of-pocket costs that consumers typically have to pay when they have non-standard drops. So under our prior plan, we may have afforded a standard drop, may have been 300 feet aerial, certainly not underground. So here in the details, I'm going to give it short shrift today, but in the details, basically Consolidated is committing to, if they have existing facilities that are usable, any distance aerial will be free. And then if there's an underground path that's usable, that will be free. And then if there has to be new underground, they'll do up to 500 feet. As I said, this is substantially more than we could have afforded under our prior plan. And this really matters in rural areas. One of the multiple barriers of adoption is that one-time out-of-pocket cost to connect. So we feel that this really helps. And finally, our board members did a fabulous job advocating for our project, and we're able to generate from 7 towns local ARPA match. We have set some aside for general construction, but we've also set $175,000 aside to help pay for non-standard drops. So we feel like we've really got our constituents covered. So going on to accountability and risk reduction, CCI, as I said earlier, is co-investing almost $10 million, so we don't have a need for a revenue bond. They're leveraging their existing pole agreements and assets, which reduces not only time delays, but also costs associated with make ready. And then, of course, they're an experienced operator, so we don't have to be in startup mode. Rather than Lamoille FiberNet bearing the risk of operating the network and maintaining the network and marketing the products and services, that risk and cost falls on CCI, and they're experienced and ready to do so. They've got a highly resilient fiber network and supported by an experienced workforce. And someone pointed out to me last week that I think the Montpelier or Barry, their fiber network there, performed very well during the floods. So we feel it was designed to be resilient, and in fact, it has demonstrated that it is resilient. From a customer service perspective, Fidium is already delivering industry-leading customer service in Maine and New Hampshire and elsewhere in Vermont, and this was very important to us. We didn't want to just build a network and then let it go. We wanted to make sure that we knew how our internet service provider was going to perform. Fidium, like many companies, uses what's called a Net Promoter Score, which is what do we call it? The gold standard for measuring customer experience and customer service. So you'll see that in our Schedule D as something that we want Fidium to continue to perform to. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, we're building the network, they're designing the network to have future capacity, and they're also committed to keeping us current with the same products. Finally, this is a 20-year, our partnership is a minimum 20-year commitment with a 10-year automatic renewal. The contracts will cover service quality, network performance, and consumer protection with our oversight. So we have reporting and communication woven into the agreement. We have continuity protections that help us understand what's going to happen at the end of 20 years if we decide not to continue in a partnership. We also have contemplated change of control, and we've also contemplated default. And I can explain those in more detail if you'd like. They were in the application materials. And finally, because CCI is really taking on most of the work of operating the network and provisioning the services, it gives our CUD more time and opportunity to focus on adoption and digital equity across the county, which we think is vitally important to our communities. So with that, we may not have control over everything, but we believe we have put the right controls in the right places to make this a successful partnership and a really good investment, not only for VCBB funds, but also for our communities. So I'd love to take questions if you'd like.
Christine, before we open it up to questions to Val, are you going to have Telus review her findings from the CTC report?
Yes, you've got those findings. She's reviewed and confirmed everything, but if you'd like to ask Telus questions, Telus' job is to confirm the numbers and the design, which they have done. If you want to specifically address any questions to Telus, any board members, please do.
Okay, let's open it up to questions to both Val and to CTC.
That's okay.
All right, I'll start with a question to Telus. In her report, she notes, it's page 81 of the PDF. It says, under the partnership, CCI will build, operate, maintain phase 1 of the network. LFCUD will own all infrastructure funded by the grant, excluding core infrastructure, while CCI will own all portions of the network built using CCI funding. The piece excluding core infrastructure, can you elaborate on that? Tell us. Let's tell us on.
Yeah, I believe Celeste is on. I'm Tyler. I'm one of the engineers on her team. And I'll let her speak to it when she gets back. But I believe Val can confirm this. I think with Consolidated's approach, I think what they're insinuating by that is that the core network equipment, i.e. the wire centers that they're building, would be part of that core network equipment that they're referring to. And I guess Val can correct me if I'm wrong, but
So
I'm
if
thinking.
so Tyler or Vale, if that's funded by the grant, that would be assumed by CCI as ownership, even though it's funded by the grant?
So just for the record, I'm Lisa Birmingham and I'm using Val Davis's computer. Val has a much nicer voice than I do.
Sorry
So
about that.
no apologies. The way the ownership works, it is to the Southern Vermont structure where our grant funds are going to be used to pay for the fiber from the central office to the drop pole, essentially to all for eligible addresses, so not the RDOF addresses. And CCI will own the drops, the backbone, pole rights, interconnections, etc. So the stuff that's housed in the CO. And yeah.
Yeah,
We
and let me,
also-
I think you should provide some more clarification on that too, because there is a difference between how you've structured this from Southern Vermont in terms of how, and so you may want to talk about, I would suggest you talk about what happens in the case of default.
Let me, so in the deck, I'm going to share my screen again. Hopefully folks can see. Okay. So the pretty colorful map to the right reflects the ownership of assets. So the ownership is perpetual. So the CUD will own all the fiber from the central office to the drop pole on routes to grantable addresses. So that's reflected in the orange. And the RDOF addresses, you are basically reflected in pink. I hope that you guys are seeing the same colors I am. And then again, as described in the application, CCI owns what I would say is the engine of the network, the backbone, the equipment in the central office, the interconnects, the pole rights, etc.
And explain what you mean by backbone as well.
All right, so Eric Gar, I'm gonna bring you in, but the backbone is what interconnects our system or CCI's system to the rest of Vermont and the world, as well as has the capacity, and so it is not the distribution. So what you're basically seeing on this map is the distribution network rather than the backbone per se. Eric, is that fair enough? Is that? Oh, I think you might be on mute or. So let me just, one of the things that we've done here that might be slightly different than you've seen before, and this was our concern about making sure that we had a path forward in case something unanticipated came up, such as a default or say just at the end of the contract. So at the end of the contract, as I said, it's a 20-year contract with a 10-year renewal. Under the terms of the agreement, CCI has exclusive access rights right now to provision service. At the end of the contract, they will not. We also, our rights to network, to have CCI provide network operations and maintenance and provision of service also expire. We also retain all of our ownership interest. We have negotiated an irrevocable right to co-locate in each of CCI's 4 wire centers on commercially reasonable terms. That survives the contract. That's what gives us a path forward should we not reach agreement with CCI for another 30 years. So because we have, as the next bullet that says non-renewal explains, because the CUD owns its fiber and has a right to co-locate, we can select and negotiate with another ISP or renew a CCI on updated terms. This is not uncommon to have a successor ISP. They'll bring their backbone into the CO or fiber meet point, use the co-location space, and then provision all the necessary equipment to serve the customers. And what typically happens is that successor negotiates with the incumbent and IRU to ensure the end-to-end support. In default, right? So there are several areas where we have protected ourselves in case of default. And I'll go over those in a minute, but in the case of default, during the life of the contract, the 20 years, or say it's year 25 and we're in that 10-year renewal, if something goes wrong, the CUD is going to have a full path IRU to provision end-to-end service from the CO to the customer premise, including the drops. So remember, under the normal agreement, under the baseline, we don't own the drops. We don't have access to the customer. If there's a default, we do. So they would lose the exclusive right to access, and they've committed in our agreement to cooperate with us for a smooth transition. So the three areas of potential default are failure to complete construction, failure to maintain adequate speeds. So we have a speed testing regime. If they fail more than 3 speed tests in 24 months, that triggers default. And then finally, the third measure of default is a failure to maintain their NPS or customer service score. And this is higher than Southern Vermont's. It is 15 points above the state average. So they have to be a leading provider of service in Vermont. And they have to maintain that leading edge. Otherwise, that could also trigger default.
All right, let's move questions. Let's move questions to Laura, then Holly, and I'm just recognizing the time, and we still have quite a bit of agenda left. So Laura, you're up.
Great, thanks. Lisa, thanks for your work. Thanks for your whole team's work. I know it's been years and years that you all have been working on this. I have a number of questions, not in any particular order. I know Lamoille's been pretty hard hit with the flooding. Do we anticipate any construction delays? I think you're not looking at construction for at least another year, right?
We hope to start in January. Detailed design would start as soon as the grant would get approved. So but I don't anticipate issues
with flooding.
Okay. Yeah, and so that's another reason. So while we have it scheduled as a 12-month build, that's why having a grant term that says 24 months to build. Who knows what the winter will bring? Another ice storm,
or two.
Yeah.
Who's your I apologize. Who's your electric utility up there? Do you have multiple?
We have multiple. We are
I'll move on past this
question. Mostly municipals and Vermont Electric Co-op.
Okay. Well, actually, I will ask if I could. Just a question from if there's undergrounding or moving of lines, do you have a commitment from CCI to follow the utility?
Eric, I'll have to say I don't think we've gotten that. What we have an agreement to do is any change in address or plan has to be mutually agreed to. So nothing, it can't happen unilaterally.
Patty's okay for CCI to answer that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'd ask for the use case, like what's the purpose of the move? So I'm not sure I understand the question fully, Laura.
So a number of our utilities, because of climate change, are in the process of moving lines out of the woods or undergrounding them to harden our infrastructure for storms. That does leave an open question about what's going to happen with those poles and wires that are up there. We have a public investment here, and you know, is there a commitment from you in these areas to go underground if the utility is going under?
Yeah, I think, you know, my experience is when that happens, the industry typically collaborates and we would try and do the same. But in terms of a commitment, it's really case by case because we may have a different set of circumstances with poles that we're on. We may have other agreements. So I'm not sure I can answer case by case, but in general, when someone opens a trench, we tend to try to take advantage of that.
So in general, but no commitment.
We'd have to do it case by case, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. And then Lisa, I think what I heard you say, my question is basically, can you divorce and what are you left with?
Yes.
And what I heard you say is, yes, you can divorce if they don't complete construction on time, maintain appropriate speeds, or the
NPS score, customer
yeah,
service score. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is a different, so this is just for Fidium or for consolidated, the NPS score? Who's measured? Because we've been using that back and forth and one of them has a pretty low service quality reputation.
Yeah, it's Fidium. And the benchmark will be against other ISPs and measured in Vermont. So we think that's a very fair and higher standard, honestly, than others.
Okay, and we are seeing some activity now with Fidium's parent company that's pretty predictable, I think, with that company. We've seen it time and again here in Vermont with reductions in staff and a lot of work out there. In the past, that's resulted in some service in state service quality investigations. You have no concerns? So this question, Patty, is for the CUD, for staff, TELUS, and Consolidated. With reductions in staff, with increasing work, you have no concerns about this?
I'll just say, I believe we put the right controls in place in our agreement and our term sheet to ensure that we have a recourse and remedy if there's not. So one of the, in our application, what we detailed was that there's a lot of reporting and monitoring. That's our oversight. We want to make sure that things are on time, on budget, and we're getting what we've asked for, whether it's in construction or in ongoing performance. They've made a commitment to adequately staff and provision and supply for construction as well as service. So our first order of recourse is remediation. We also, by the way, in addition to the NPS score, part of our Schedule D also included measuring and monitoring DPS complaints and AG complaints. And of course, we're going to respond to our constituents who have no problem calling us. So I would say that we're prepared. As I said earlier, thank you.
I'm happy to come back on this question with staff because I do have a couple more and I know we're trying to move through, Patty. So I actually have 3 more questions. So one, Lisa, is really tell me about how your CUD sustains its, like, continues to go on, in 8 years, 9 years. Why does it continue to go on? What is the mechanism or the investments or the assets? What is it that keeps your CUD moving in 8 years?
I would say, so Right, so because we don't have to generate our own revenue to sustain operations, I think the vision is that our governing board, like most of our select boards or zoning boards, we're going to be self-governing in terms of funding to do it. So what we've tried to do is fund through 2026 because we need lawyers, we need accountants, there'll be audits, etc. So the pre-construction grant, which overlays the construction time period, should get us there. We're also looking at, as the application mentioned, strategic planning with Lamoille County Planning Commission or other CUDs for shared services to stretch our dollars so that the governing board can focus on governance and that the operations will be, there'll be a reduced budget, I'm sure, for operations post-construction. But that's what I think that's the best answer I can give you right now. We are looking ahead.
Okay. Okay.
There's not a constant revenue stream. Yeah.
Okay, that is really important to me. We had a public service or a public really emergency situation starting to emerge in Vermont when our legacy telephone company, stopped providing regular good maintenance of infrastructure, and we didn't have a means of holding them accountable. And so the CUDs are really the means, to have them partner with all of our existing providers in the state is the best case scenario. I mean, it's perfect because they're already here. But ensuring that we have healthy, strong CUDs that can hold these private sector entities receiving a great deal of public dollars accountable. So your sustainability, that you'll still be here in 8 years is actually really important to me. Next question is for staff. Our private sector staff and/or you, Lisa, private sector both matches monitored and tracked to stay in ratio with the grant funds. So we have commitments from CCI. Who is monitoring that? That we're kind of going together.
You mean in total funding or as we construct? We have
as we construct. So we're not getting through the publicly funded and then getting the other publicly funded investment from CCI.
Right. So CCI is putting up. So the payment schedule, if you recall, is we're not releasing 50%. So we're asking for roughly 15 million today. We're not going to release half of that until it's all done.
Okay.
And then if they don't, remember that the 98% trigger is if they're less than 98%, they're going to be paying us.
Okay.
And so I feel very comfortable. The other thing is that we did spend time, it's in the longer term sheet, to make sure, because the CUD has obligations, grant obligations and reporting obligations, that there was a high level of cooperation with their financial record keeping and our financial record keeping. So there's a commitment there to make sure that they're supporting us in that regard. That was very important. And in talking with Southern Vermont, it's been going extremely well, and I have no reason to doubt. For those of you who know me, I'm a compliance hawk, so I feel comfortable that we'll get the information we need.
And then what happens to
Laura,
pricing structures?
Laura, I'm going to interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
Dan has a 1:30 tap out timeline. Dan, do you have any questions or comments that you want to throw up before you leave? I know it's only 2 minutes away.
I'm going to stretch that out a little bit because I let some folks here know I'm going to be late, but I do have a few. Sorry to interject there. First, Lisa, thank you. I think great job in addressing and speaking to the risks identified variously. Looking forward, keeping the CUD in some format intact for capturing any management that might be needed, but at the same time, keeping the CUD very lean. So there are a lot of administrative costs because that will be borne by the incumbent. An important question that I have is in regards to any overbuild of other incumbent companies, particularly phone companies or wires companies in this proposal? Please.
There is incidental overbuild. As you can imagine, here's the hand. So this is all served, right? And this is all unserved. I gotta go through the village. So yes, there is overbuild.
Maybe I could be more specific about that.
Mhm.
Is this relationship with CCI overbuilding other telco incumbents?
No, it's all within CCI's current footprint.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the most important question that I had, and
Okay.
that sets a lot of concern I have aside. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, back to you, Laura. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Patty. What happens to the pricing structures 10 years out, Lisa? Who controls that decision?
So that it is the pricing is that controlled by Consolidated or its successors. I will mention, because I just said the word successors, we've thought ahead that the part of our 20-year agreement is that they must assign all of the contracts, not just the liability, all of the commitments in our agreements to any successor in interest. There is a commitment to affordability in terms of participation in ACP and other programs as they evolve. Again, go ahead.
So I think I'm hearing that the CUD does not have any say in pricing.
No.
Okay. Great. And then I guess my last question is Lamoille willing to make the same commitment that Maple and NEK made? The board is in the middle of a pretty important process around accountability. And we could pull up the language if you like, but agreed to abide by future accountability policies in order for us to not pause grant applications to fund theirs and not wait until we were done with our accountability work to come back.
Right. So I would say that the statute is clear that you have the authority to develop certain policies, right, relating to transfer of assets and what happens. Well, there's a list. So we in our Schedule D, CCI has committed to future policies that the board may develop consistent with Act 71. However, that's different than, it may be different than grant terms, construction grant terms. And so our concern would be it's hard not to speculate how would this impact our grant versus the policies that you have to set for everybody outside of a grant, right? So I think the devil's in the details, and I'm not giving you a yes or no because I couldn't, and our board has talked about this because we don't know what it means to make that commitment. If our grant terms are substantially different than other CUDs that have come before us, that may be problematic. And but we certainly understand that you have a statutory obligation on several of the policies. I was looking at them this morning because I knew this question would come up. So there are things that you do have to do, but not necessarily within the grant itself.
So, I just want to be clear. Sorry, I'm going to call you Val because it says Val there. Lisa, I want to be clear that will be the motion that is going to be put forward. That the motion will be to approve a grant subject to future policies developed by the VCBB related to accountability. It'll be the same verbiage essentially as the last meeting and the two grants that were issued.
But those grantees already had, those were construction grant amendments. So that the retroactive, my understanding was your ability to retroactively apply those to the underlying grant maybe.
This is for future grants. So any grant we approve from today going forward will be subject to new accountability policies if they're developed.
So Patty, may I jump in?
Yes,
I think,
sure.
I think what I'm hearing, I think I'm hearing Lisa kind of push back and say we were retroactively applying that to a grant that we already had. We don't have it. Well, we do have one grant with you. So would it be your preference, rather than us to pass that, to table this until we finish our work?
Well, I don't think, I don't want to leave Lamoille County behind again. So we would like to begin the detailed design work as soon as possible. And I wish I could tell, I can only see your faces. I can't see my board members' faces. Again, I just say that, you know, there are definitely policies that you guys have to implement. And I would just ask that my understanding is the construction terms may not necessarily be impacted by the policies. We built in a lot of accountability into this, into our agreement with Consolidated. And so I don't know, maybe I'm missing this, but I can see Holly shaking her head. Maybe she has a question.
Dan has a question,
Okay.
actually, Patty.
Yeah. Holly's been waiting patiently. Dan, how long do we have you? It'd be great.
Probably 10 or 15 more minutes.
Okay. Holly, you're muted.
This is the penultimate question, and if Dan has a comment, I'd like to hear what he has to say, and then I will make a comment. I'm sorry for making faces at you, Lisa.
Dan, you're up.
I was just wondering if the pre-construction portion of this would allow you to start your detailed design without committing you to any of the future policies, and that would keep the ball rolling on a positive note while we continue to work as expediently as we can for those policies. Lisa, would that continue keep things moving along?
Well, that would, but that also, it takes us farther down the road with CCI rather than an alternative. So I guess perhaps, I guess I'd love to hear from Holly, and then maybe if Eric, you want to comment.
May I? Patty?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
First, I wanted to give credit where credit due. Lisa, you know, I don't have your document, your contract with CCI in my hands, but in following as methodically as possible your presentation and the remedies you've utilized using the legal tools in your toolbox, you have done a superb job. And my congratulations to you, your board, and to CCI for coming together to
Great.
address a long checklist of operating and construction issues that are wily to navigate. So thank you. Thank you for doing a good job. Now, CCI's counsel was here. I'm sorry, but I don't remember her name nor whether she was general counsel or associate counsel. My apologies. But at our last meeting, CCI's counsel was here and indicated that she would object strenuously to compliance with board policies. And I think that you may have addressed many of our concerns, but we need to know that the operating system is going to implement these policies, not just the CUD or not just during the grant phase. That's really our problem, is that it isn't just about saying that in the future certain policies may apply and we'll get there when we get there. Our vehicle for making this work is the grant terms.
Yep.
So, I could see my way clear to perhaps supporting a pre-construction grant, like many others, not subject to these policies, but knowing that your grant construction agreement will be subject to board policy.
Lisa, before you answer that question, do you want to take a moment to caucus with your CUD board? We can come back to you toward the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I would also, I guess sure, we can do that. We're gonna lose one board member, Dan Nelson, of course. I would just say that, again, the reluctance is I don't know what I'm committing to, right? And so, that's been kind of the issue. And I've been in virtual attendance watching you guys try and drive towards solutions and get something done, right? And we all wish it was a year ago, but it's not. We're here now, right? So, and we have committed, both Lamoille and CCI, to VCBB policies as amended as they are. That's in our Schedule D. That said, it's how, and the way we saw those policies, we have a 20-year agreement that oversees customer service and operations, versus in the RFP, the life of the performance period was, I think, 6 years. So anyway, that's where we are. It's I would offer, I understand that grant terms get negotiated. I don't know what those are going to look like. So maybe that's the contingency, So
could you explain what you mean? What's the contingency?
Well, that I'd rather know that you guys, but for, to use a overused term, that but for this important issue, you guys would support our universal service plan and construction grant. So why don't we move it forward, and when we get the grant terms negotiated, come back to you and make sure it's acceptable. And if that's acceptable, if you've done your policies by then, that would be awesome. If you haven't, we'll have this conversation a second time. Yeah.
So Patty, just for the record, I wouldn't be willing to do that. And I think the way that we structure the motion for the other CUDs does make the contingency clear up front, that it's subject to board policies. Lisa, I'm sorry if this is in the 170 pages of board book material and I missed it, but is there a provision by which some revenue stream comes back to the CUD to sustain the CUD operating board?
No.
So I have a little, I'm going to say to you that I have a little experience sitting on the EC Fiber operating board. And it's tiresome, grueling work. And your board has been so invested and so dedicated, but we all have our limits. I know I do. And so I just say to you that there may even be policies that are established that are helpful to you.
Yeah.
Because you cannot enforce a contract if nobody's home or you don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
That's me.
Thank you.
So Lisa, did you want to take a short break? So we can come back.
Yeah, because look, this is really important.
And short is relative. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to preface short is relative. We're going to bump you down the agenda essentially. We will lose Dan, but you still you'll have 3 of us.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to table Lamoille Fiber Networks construction and pre-construction grant. application, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Next on our agenda is Otter Creek. And before we jump into Otter Creek, I just want to bring up the same issue, that any motion for approval of the construction grant is going to come with a contingency that it's subject to future policies developed by the VCBB. And do you need time to speak with your board or any outside entities before you present?
Hi, thank you. Just make sure everyone hears me. I'm Laura Black. Yes, you know, maybe I should have anticipated this question. I know obviously it's an issue. I don't have a legal background. I would say my feeling is that I can't imagine any way that I or my board could sign a commitment to something we don't know what it is. So again, I'd have to confer with my board. I'd probably have to confer with my legal team. And yeah, I suppose that's something I wouldn't be able to say yes to that today on my own.
Okay. Would you like the opportunity to move down the agenda as well and take the time? Or do you want to come back?
So.
Or
I'm
do you
not
want to
sure
come back?
that I would answer today, but I can try.
Okay, we'll give you the opportunity to do that and have you come back toward the end of the meeting. Christine, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I'd just like to have Tony talk about this. Is, you know, this I've never experienced this in my contracting career about putting future, unknown future requirements on grants. And I'd like Tony to talk about the legal enforceability of that. You know, certainly the board has the option not to approve the grants. I understand that, but about putting unknown conditions on grants in the future, I'd love to hear Tony's thoughts on that.
Excuse me. Hi. Yes, as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, I do have concerns about retroactive application of grant conditions, unknown grant conditions. But you know, it's the board is within its authority to, you know, to approve or not approve this grant.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I really can appreciate that concern from folks, and you know, it's why and perhaps we're too easily suggesting that other folks might be willing to go down the same path as NEK and Maple. You know, the first request that I had was that we not fund any more applications until we finished our accountability work. And in fact, it sounds like that might be the preference of the CUDs. I can understand why this is hard.
Mm-hmm. Holly?
So ditto what Laura said, and one thing that we accomplish by putting this condition on this caveat on the grant is that we accept the homework that's been done by the CUD and the staff as to the rest of the grant application. And then we find out how the accountability policies impact that. It shouldn't change what our decision is about our policies, whether or not these grants are sitting there. It doesn't. But if CUDs want to wait and submit their grant applications later, that is perfectly within their control. You know, we have done our best for some years now, rushing forward. And it was very painful to say, we need to stop for a minute. And if we had anticipated this better, I could say there could have been some staff support on these issues that would have helped. But, you know, it doesn't matter. There's blame enough to go all around. The fact of the matter is we got to get the job done.
Well said, Dan.
First, I'm really sorry because I do have to go. I would suggest maybe since we will be missing 2 people, you'll still have a quorum, I believe, that you could vote, but I would suggest maybe that the time, maybe 2 weeks, would be sufficient to get things in order and delay or postpone the final review of these based on the additional work that could get done in the meantime. And I'll leave it at that. And I'm sorry for that, and I'm deeply sorry for it now, but the timing on my end, and I know Brian's got a similar situation where it cannot be helped right now. But if we could, maybe it's better if what I'm hearing is that it's better if we take a breath, even if it's only for 2 weeks, and get ourselves a bit better aligned on policies. I'll leave it at that. Unless you have questions for me.
Christine, we could approve pre-construction, correct? We can at least do the two. We can at least do the 2 pre-construction.
Yeah, it's certainly up to the board. I mean, I don't see any reason why you couldn't.
These 2 applications have pre-construction in them.
Would Dan stick around for at least one of those votes? I have this other question that's related. The criteria that are in the proposed agreement with CCI have a way of addressing some of the policy areas that we're going to talk about. A redacted copy of that agreement would be helpful and may help us drive some of the policy approaches that we would do. So that could be a tool used by the subcommittees in these various policy areas to test what could be done. So I guess I'm asking staff whether they could make a redacted copy of that agreement available to us.
Yes, of course we can. Yes, we'd be happy to.
Holly, do you mean specifically the Lamoille CCI document?
Yep. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we consider that we grant the Lamoille's request for their pre-construction grant without caveat to start, recognizing that any construction grant going forward would be actually, what's tearing me up inside is that we have made this a condition for other CUDs. But those were construction funding grants, not pre-construction, correct? There is a point of differentiation.
That's different pre-construction funds.
Yeah, so I'm looking desperately for the amount of this grant here. But I guess I would make a motion to approve $1,369,478 in pre-construction funding.
Wrong number.
No, that's the correct number.
Okay.
Sorry.
At the request of.
So in my notes for Lamoille, it says 1,724,000. That's wrong?
That's wrong.
Okay. Thought Christine clarified that was correct. Lisa, can you tell us the pre-construction number?
Holly's correct. The 1.7 included 355 that we already had, so we only were asking for 1,369,478.
Never say just when you're asking for $1 million.
Okay.
I think Lucy, can you weigh in here? I'm really confused now because I thought we were transferring that amount to Northwest, but
No, I would weigh in to clarify what the numbers Lisa just provided. The 1.7 million referenced earlier will be the total amount, and that will come to the total amount that we had originally set aside for Lamoille. But because we had previously approved the roughly 300,000, the 1.369 million is what we are approving today on top of what we've previously
Okay.
approved.
Thank you.
And Patty, may I go on to say that I'm justifying this recommendation or this motion based on the fact that you can't implement policy on a pre-construction level work anyway.
All right, I'm going to second Holly's motion. Is there further discussion?
No, if I might, I would just, Lisa, really echo all of the comments from Holly earlier. Thank you very much for your work.
My board.
Hearing no further discussion, I'm going to call it. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry. Congratulations. You at least got part of it, Lisa. Well done.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have to drop.
Thanks, Dan, for sticking.
Thank you.
All right, Otter Creek, I'm going to give you an opportunity to stay on with us. Laura, do you want to go through the pre-construction request? If we can at least take that up.
I could, but it was kind of so secondary and follow-up. First, let me just say again, thank you to Lisa Birmingham Lamoille, because we joined with them fairly recently in our process, which maybe I'll tell you at, I don't know if we're doing the next meeting, whatever, for my presentation. But Lisa and her board have done tremendous work, and it has obviously, helped our situation. We are using, same terms. Obviously, we're working with Consolidated, and yeah, it's been really helpful. So let's see. I guess I could request our pre-construction application. Let me see through my notes if I can sort of just jump to that, or maybe I'll forget about my notes and just look at my application and discuss that with you briefly. So we are asking for an amendment to our pre-construction application, which was submitted to look for the date, and from June 2022. And as we've moved towards developing our planning for our construction, we've seen the need for additional funds. Certainly with working for Lamoille, we see that there are some services that we really need to get going on, and so we realized that we didn't have enough funding in what we had applied for back in 2022. Let's see. Additionally, we were able to, as we looked through our proposed funding and the pre-construction monies that could be available, we found that we could allocate some of those funds to design and make ready, and that actually helped out our construction planning. So, which actually allowed, well, it's in my presentation, but the town, we were able to add a whole area. It was, I think, 2 areas in Paulet, so that we got another town served just from reallocation of funds. So in our pre-construction fund, we increased the length of the time for that fund to serve us through our construction period, just through 2026, which our previous request did not go that far. let's see. Probably don't have a lot more on that. Again, I wasn't really prepared to just pull that out and talk off the top of my head on that. Let's see. I think there's one slide in my presentation that may address, that just shows the part of our pre-construction fund being used in our construction fund. I could show you that. Let's see where to present. Oh, share screen. You'll show complete screen. Can you see this? I don't think so, right?
Very
Yes.
small. Yeah,
Oh,
it's just very
okay.
small.
Let me see.
If you,
Does that help at all? Wait,
yes.
that. Okay, well, oh, I see. That's presenter view. Well, if you can see it, you can just see in the pre-construction grant funding. I don't have a slide of our pre-construction grant, I realized. But the 360,000 is the amount that we would allocate for pre-construction grant funding. And as we were discussing earlier, this fund, we could at least start moving forward. Our current request for
Small. Can you just run down what you would use the pre-construction funds for briefly?
for design and make ready.
And do you
So
have an
it's
allocation
higher level
of,
engineering design.
do you have an allocation of how much of the fund, the 1.3 would be for each?
For that engineering and make ready, 360,000. I don't have those broken down. I believe.
Patty, can I point out that page, I think it's 138 in our board book, shows
Thank
a
you.
breakout.
That's helpful. 138?
Yes, please.
Let me get there.
I guess it's technically 139.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's helpful. It's the table you're looking at.
And maybe somebody from staff wants to put it into the view, the presentation.
I would be happy to do that, Christine, if you want me to pull that up for folks.
Yeah, I think Laura, you'll have to release your.
I think I can share over.
Okay,
both.
thank you.
Great. That's what I
That's
hoped
very helpful. Thank you.
you would show. Thank you.
Any questions for the board? Laura, one question for you. I'm just, your decision to partner with Lamoille, just geographically, it doesn't make sense to me given the distance.
Right. No, I didn't mean that the CUDs are combining. But when Lamoille began, I think, working further on terms and conditions with Consolidated, we actually have the same legal counsel. We recognized, frankly, I can't remember how we actually made the connection. Oh, actually, I think it was with staff.
We're talking about
Christine.
working in terms
It
of,
was probably you guys that said, why don't you guys talk to each other? And realized that Lamoille was going further in developing terms and conditions with the partner that we're working with, same partner that they're working with, Consolidated. And so it made sense, Consolidated as well, didn't want to develop separate terms for each CUDs. I mean, we're trying to rectify the same questions about accountability and affordability and control in the future and so on. So we agreed to talk together, share our ideas, and in the end, Consolidated, definitely wanted to bring the same terms to Otter Creek that they worked with, which, have been developed.
makes sense.
My understanding is they've been developed since Southern Vermont and developed since the VCBB has, started working on accountability policy. So, that many of the subjects are raised. So progress has moved forward. We're on the same train, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Holly?
Laura, can I just ask you who that legal counsel is that you're sharing?
Primer Piper and Eggleston.
Thank you.
And Holly, just a housekeeping point, we consented to the two of them using the same counsel. Just to,
Thank you.
I'm not a
Feel the
lawyer, but
alarm bells running
I
around.
understand. I'm not a lawyer, so you should discount that appropriately. But no, that's what we did, and that's kind of how we viewed it. Is it was just kind of in everybody's interest to smooth out the process a little bit.
Well, and it certainly, consistency will help
Yes.
everyone in the long run. So thank you.
Yeah, we felt everybody wins. Like it was just kind of made sense.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Other questions?
Yes,
Oh,
Patty.
Go ahead, Laura.
Just to make sure I'm clear. So we have the same contract terms. Are they identical contracts?
there are some very minor differences. So I was going to say, maybe I should just describe my presentation just slightly. Certainly, Otter Creek CUD has a bit of a different situation in that we're building out of territory. And that brings up some slightly different terms. But I think it's only one item.
Laura, what do you mean by out of territory? I think I've missed this.
Yeah, because I haven't made my presentation because we decided not to.
Just go ahead. But this impacts pre-construction grant work. If you're doing pre-construction grant work out of territory, like out of territory design, we need to understand what that means.
Okay, well, let me do a little starting over. Let me grab my map and I'll see if I can do a better job sharing my screen here.
Our apologies. We're trying to make this efficient for everyone and we may have missed a cue here.
Let's see. I don't know if window or screen is better, but start. So do you see that? Because now
No.
Hang on, let me do screen. Maybe this. Yeah.
Now we see it.
Oh, good. I don't, but.
Yeah, and I know
There
it's
we
difficult
go.
because you can't see us, but you might want to make it bigger by looking in, isn't it presenter view? Oh, there you go.
Okay. So now can you see this is my second slide.
Yes.
So this is our territory essentially. And let me say it consists of Benson, West Haven, Hubbardton, Sudbury, Castleton. Much of this area is not in Consolidated's ILEC territory. Our other towns, Brandon, Goshen, Chittenden, Mendon, Shrewsbury, Rutland, West Rutland, Pittsford, Castleton, Pulteney, Wells, and Paulet are all in Consolidated's ILEC territory.
So when you say it's out of territory, you mean it's out of CCI's ILEC territory. You don't mean it's outside the Otter Creek district.
Oh, correct. Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm breathing again.
I'm sorry about that. So we know that this is our full service plan. On the left, on the right is the service that we're asking for our construction grant for. But our plan is to serve the towns that are outside of Consolidated's territory in our construction grant plan. And to serve those, yeah, as part of this grant application.
But using Consolidated as the operator, correct, Laura?
Oh, yes.
Yes, right. Okay. So, Patty, we have the information on the table through the grant application of what the pre-construction grant would be used for. The amount is $1,314,650. I think we have the same situation with regard to policy matters here. Should we, unless Laura has an objection, should we just put the motion on the table? I caught you in the wrong moment, maybe, but I guess I will make that motion to approve the pre-construction grant for Otter Creek in the amount of $1,314,650 without the contingency regarding the VCBB policies, acknowledging that the pre-construction grant is focused on a construction project that is described in another grant.
I'll second that motion. Is Laura still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
I would just, Laura, note, my ongoing concern, not in this, well, it's not in this grant, so no, nothing.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The pre-construction grant is approved.
Patty,
Yes.
so may I just offer one comment to Laura? Yeah, which is that I have the same concerns about sustainability of the CUD in 8 years. Why will you be here? I think Holly has articulated it well. I'm concerned about no revenue to the CUD to ensure that someone's there. So.
Yes, thank you, Representative Sibilia. And I really appreciate you bringing that up because that's been a concern that I and my board have recognized fairly recently, probably as well. And it's something that we actually want to use part of this pre-construction grant funding to help us move forward. We are also intending, and I have a partial semi-commitment from Rutland Regional Planning Commission to become engaged and work with Otter Creek. But exactly how that would work out in the future is really not known at this time. So,
And, I will also say, because I don't know if we said it at the top, but thank you very much for all the work you and your board are doing. This is hard work. It's really imperative that we get it done. We know it's hard also negotiating with private sector carriers, some of them, the exact ones that aren't covering our people now. And we appreciate the commitment and the time that you put into this. Thank you very much.
thank you, board members.
Well said, Laura. Okay, so Laura Black, we're going to table the construction grant application. If you would like to speak with anybody on your board before we conclude, we'll give you an opportunity to come back for the construction grant part of your proposal. But just noting that we would make a motion that it would be subject to future VCBB board policy creation relative to accountability. We'll just leave that opportunity available
Okay.
to you.
I should probably come back before the end of the meeting and tell you whether that's a yes or no to.
You don't have to decide today, though.
Okay.
Right, exactly.
Yes, okay.
But your grant will not be approved without
Understood.
that.
Right. But if
Yes.
you'd like to have that opportunity, you have a window in today's meeting to come back and ask for consideration.
Okay. Maybe
Because our meetings are
before-
just that long.
Exactly.
The what's are just that long?
The meetings.
Our meetings.
Yeah,
I'm just saying,
exactly.
we're going to be here for another hour or so you can come
Yeah.
I
back.
know. Well, maybe I'll see you before 3 o'clock or 3:30. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to EC Fiber and see where we are with EC Fiber.
Patty,
Yes.
I have to make a comment here. We are down to 3 board members, and my intention is to recuse myself on the EC Fiber application because they are serving my town. And I have served on a board with FX Flynn, and I've sat on the EC Fiber board. I just think there's an appearance of impropriety here. That's my sense of it. So I had intended to recuse myself. That leaves the board in a little bit of a
Yeah,
trouble.
we would not, if you're going to recuse yourself, we would not be able to take action. There's only 2 of us.
Maybe we could hear from EC Fiber about where they're at on the conditional grant approval, so we know where we're headed.
I can't imagine a world in which you guys come up with a policy that would somehow be detrimental to EC Fiber. I would imagine anything that you come up with would be modeled on our experience and would reflect everything that we've learned. I mean, one of the reasons,
FX.
the fact of the matter is that, when the state auditor did his work, they basically told us we were not part of their concern and they didn't ask us for documents or anything else. So I kind of feel like this whole area of discussion is something that we'll help with and we have a lot to contribute towards. But in a lot of ways doesn't apply to us.
That's very helpful, FX.
Or at least may I offer this, FX, that you're more than willing to meet the policy objectives that you anticipate. It's not that
because
it's not that it doesn't apply to you.
Well, yeah, right. I may have overstated the case. I'm so disappointed to get to this point and not be able to get a board decision today. You know, we've worked so hard over the course of the last, you know, 9 months to make sure that everything is aligned to make this straightforward and easy for you guys. I don't think, Holly, I think you're bending over backwards unnecessarily. I think that Jill knew you were an EC Fiber board member when she appointed you. I don't think she told you don't vote on anything involving EC Fiber. So many of the
Well-
other votes that you're taking do involve and necessarily directly involve us. So, and I, you know, I'm sorry. There's
Well, let me-
170 pages of documents, and two of the board members are not even on the call now. It's disappointing, and I just want to say that for the public record.
So FX, it's appropriate that you would say so. I do think it's very disappointing that my colleagues are not in attendance. I mean, we set these meetings in advance for a reason. And I guess I could see my way clear to say that I don't presently sit on the EC Fiber board. But Patty, I look to you. I've not heard one of my colleagues recuse themselves based on the fact that they live in a district that
Yeah,
is
I haven't.
a grantee. And so,
I mean-
Laura,
I mean, Holly, you expressed, so you put out to us that you feel like you have a conflict. Maybe we should be challenging you on that, and I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to task right now and challenging you.
Mhm.
Do you have any personal gain in the event that EC Fiber? Do you have any individual personal gain that in the event EC Fiber moves forward in its efforts to deploy fiber through your community, other than potentially becoming a member of taking service from the work that they did? You have any?
it would be a lovely day to find that EC Fiber was available at my home. And I received no money or funding or deference of any kind based on EC Fiber's grant application to serve Corinth.
So you'd be treated just as anybody else in the town in Corinth.
That's my expectation.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't see that you have a conflict. You've stated
I-
that you are on the board. And I
Mhm.
think that's good practice so that we understand that, but you're not on their board currently, correct?
That's correct. And in fact, I was required to leave the board as a condition to sitting on the VCBB. So I'm just taking the steps that I think are appropriate.
Okay. I don't think you have a need to step down or recuse yourself.
Fine,
And it's just-
I've put it on the record, and I accept the board's, I'm going to say the chair's decision that I don't need to recuse myself in this matter.
Okay. Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I think only you can make the decision whether or not you have a conflict of interest. Having heard your rationale, I would tell you, I don't think you have one. I would encourage you to make a different choice. I have voted on applications that include the town that I live in.
All right. I'm good. I will
Okay,
participate.
let's move forward then. FX, you want to do your presentation? Or I suppose I should start with Christine. Christine, do you want to tee this up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we've thoroughly reviewed the EC Fiber proposal, the grant, gone through the grant application with CTC. We've worked out all of they've answered all of our questions, and we're recommending approval of the $13,277,651 for the construction grant. And I'll turn it over to FX to tell the story.
Okay, so I'm happy to see that I have a new button in PowerPoint that says present in Teams. So I'm going to try it. Oh man, how do you like that?
Beauty.
Nice.
Okay. So, obviously, we have been trying to turn all of our district to green lines, which indicate active lit fiber. And everybody that we pass gets access to world-class broadband, which I define as 1,000 over 1,000. Not 100 over 100 or 100 over 20, but 1,000 over 1,000. That's what our network can deliver. And in Hartford, in White River Junction and Quechee, we can actually offer speeds higher than that, although we have not announced those new products and their pricing just yet. We need to get the rest of the fiber service areas in White River Junction and Quechee up and running. That's the gold area in Hartford. I want to say that what you are looking at in the materials that we've shown you, and I hope you've had an opportunity to at least read our business plan. Essentially, the business plan is built around our plan to complete our network. So right now, we're currently passing about 25,000 locations. 15,000 of those locations would be otherwise considered unserved or underserved if we weren't there. We've got 8,000 plus customers. Our network consists of about 1,700 miles of mainline access fiber and many hundreds of miles of drops. A lot of you were there on June 27th to hear us declare that our original 2008 mission to bring service to every home and business in our member towns had been accomplished with the lighting of the White River Junction hub and the beginning of our ability to serve customers in that last bit of our territory. However, we do have $63.4 million in debt that we'll be paying off over the next 20 plus years. We first issued debt in 2016, a couple of months after we transferred the assets from the LLC to the district, and we paid off half of the original investors at that time, and then we went on to borrow again in 2017, repaid the other half, and basically we went back to the bond market every year, 2018 to 2021. We did not go back in 2022. We are going back to the bond market this fall for $7.5 million. Back in May and August of 2020, we agreed to add 8 towns to the district. The board did condition that on the district finishing the original 23-town build-out, and in the belief that because of the pandemic, there would be federal money coming through that would pay for some or all of the expansion. We presently estimate it'll cost $30.4 million to complete the EC Fiber network. That'll add 550 plus or minus miles to the network, another 8,000 plus passings, and 3,000 of those are presently unserved or underserved. And when we get done, we'll have no underserved locations in our territory. Now, right now, this is the current broadband status in our district based on the DPS 2022 data. So the green dots are the location with fiber, 100, 100. The blue dots are locations with 120, and the red dots are locations considered underserved. And again, this is the 2020 data, so it doesn't reflect the fact that we've been actively finishing the work in White River Junction, Quechee, and Woodstock, which is most of the blue dots running in a diagonal above the town of Heartland, which is almost completely served by VTEL. The dots that you see along the border of Woodstock are areas that are served by CCI or have some cable presence. Now, I would point out, if you look really closely, you'll see some red dots in and around those blue lines there. And those are underserved locations that we have been building during the last 2 or 3 years. So we've been building and completing construction of our network and adding new locations that were unserved or underserved. And we've been doing that right along. At the end of the day, when things are complete, the blue dots are locations that will have 1,000 or better. And the orange dots are off-grid locations. And when we go out to do the design, the network designers go and they look to the end of every pole line and they determine what the extent of the grid is. So we're pretty confident that we can state with a certainty that these are off-grid locations, typically hunting camps. So this is what will happen when our network completion plan has come to fruition. There won't be any more unserved addresses. So what is the role of this construction grant? This construction grant is simply one element of our capital stack. And assuming that we execute our plan as presented, we'll be collecting most of this money during 2024 as we complete stages 1 through 4, which are the towns up in the north. The stages 5 through 9 are border areas and Windsor, which is largely considered served. The other elements in our capital stack are, of course, our revenue bonds. And as I said, we'll be issuing another $7.5 million in Q4. And we will probably go back for more late in 24 or early in 2025, pretty much depending on how this all plays out, how close to our estimates the costs are. We will also use operating surplus. We are actually generating what in a private business would be called profits, but which we call a surplus. Of course, we're going to go for other grants, and we'll be coming back to talk to you about some other opportunities we think exist aside from the construction grant funding. I have to say personally, I don't think we're going to be able to take advantage of BEAD, at least not in any significant way. And also, we are presently seeing if we can get rated by one of the agencies like Standard & Poor's. And if we do get a rating, that expands the market for our bonds, which implies that we'll be able to sell them at a lower effective interest rate. And we will continue to build our network as we have been doing. And as you see, the screen filling up, and the blue is everything we've built since the ARPA became available. So that's pretty much an overview of what we are coming to you with in this construction grant. And I believe that we've addressed all of the details in depth in all the paperwork. I hope the realization that we're going to be able to solve the problem of un and underserved locations in our district over the course of the next 2.5 years, in part with the assistance of Vermont Community Broadband funds, is helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, FX. Holly, you have your hand up. Do you want to go? You're muted, Holly.
Sure, I have several questions. Can you give us what percentage of your operating surplus you'll be putting towards construction, and will any portion of that be put towards lowering rates or offering affordability FX?
There's been no determination about what that would be. It's simply it's money that's there, and there are obviously competing uses for it. You've highlighted at least one. I can think of 2 or 3 others, but we are that's not an issue that we need to address at this point in time.
So the staff analysis of sustainability has nothing to do with your operating surplus. Is that right, Christine?
No, the staff on sustainability, we're looking at the business plan and the ability to sustain the business plan. It does not consider affordability from a standpoint, from the standpoint you're coming from.
But I'm looking at what I'm looking at is just, you know, the stack of financial availability was alerted, where, you know, we went through this with FX, and I'm just asking whether staff's consideration of the business plan's sustainability had to do with its operating surplus.
No, it did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
FX, you talked a lot about service capacity that's way beyond our authority to grant funding for. I need to make clear that we're not in the business of funding systems that are above 100 square. And so can you assure us that the funding you're seeking here is not increased based on the super capacities that you are speaking of? Because we're really not authorized to build Cadillacs here. We're just building Buicks.
Well, these days when you go to buy a Buick, they come in. That's basically one gigabit symmetrical is where you max out on what you can deliver. Okay, if you purchase the ability to deliver 100, the only equipment you can buy is capable of maxing out at a gigabit.
Okay,
and then the gigabit.
So the answer to the question is no, we're not inflating the cost of construction.
Exactly.
Based on these higher, I just need that on the record. Thank you. And would you explain why you don't believe that EC Fiber would make use of BEAD funding? Like, I'm
Yes,
interested
I will.
in
I
your
will.
analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Because by the time the BEAD funding becomes available, we will have essentially taken care of all the underserved locations in our district, with the exception of a handful down in West Windsor. And perhaps we'll have an opportunity to get some BEAD funding to build to those addresses, but there's only about, I don't know, 40 or 50 of them. And by the time that 2023 data comes out, there may not be any. So I just don't see any pockets of un or underserved locations that will be that the BEAD money can be applied to. I mean, BEAD is basically a line extension program, right? It's like the expectation is that the state broadband office will identify locations that need to be built to, and then the ILECs and the cable companies and the CLECs will will bid a price to extend their network to those locations. That's all it really is. And it's not anything like what EC Fiber has done, which is to create a business to solve market failure. There was no business that was ever going to deliver what we deliver in our district. We had to create a business, right? And BEAD has no imagination for that approach. So as much as we try and shoehorn it into what we're doing in Vermont, the one thing I can say with some certainty is I don't think it's going to do anything for EC Fiber. At a construction level, I have some ideas about how we may be able to use it for digital equity and things like that. And it may involve, like expensive drops, and it may involve, other things. So I see that we may get some BEAD money that way. I just don't see getting BEAD money for the principal task of completing the network so that there's availability. I've said this before. Until you have availability, you really can't tackle affordability.
I know you have said that before. I want to put it on the record that I wholeheartedly disagree, but we don't need to discuss that here. The reason for my question to FX and Patty and Tony and Christine, I specifically want to identify that when we're looking at policy issues, we cannot assume that BEAD will fix policy issues and that they can be put into the BEAD program. We need to look holistically at what our Act 71 guidance is and create policy around that. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura, or Holly. Laura, do you have any? I know it was already jumping in my mind to Laura to see if she had any questions.
I do not.
All right, I'd like to thank you, everyone. I'd like to put a motion on the table that we approve the construction grant request for EC Fiber, the amount of $13,227,657, subject to future policies being developed by VCBB related to accountability.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Laura. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes carry. Congratulations, FX.
Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate it, and we look forward to having you for a series of parties where you can give us a big cardboard check.
Excellent.
Will there be a band, though? Will there be a band?
Oh, that band is going to be invited again.
Love the band.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Christine?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, really, give a message to the board in Lamoille and Otter Creek that, my belief is that what they have, they're probably not ready to make this decision, but I would encourage them to consider the fact that I do think the agreement they have with Fidium will stand up to a future accountability policy. So, my recommendation to them would be to accept your terms. But I'm guessing that they need to take that to their board. But part of that discussion really is, the question for the board is how soon will the accountability policies be in place? Comes with that as well. So I think those are a couple questions we don't need to answer now, but I'd like to just address that before the end of the meeting. So I'm pretty confident that they've got pretty strong accountability policies in place with Fidium. But that ties to that question. And I would say at this point, Rob has to catch a plane, so we're going to move into the next item as quickly as possible here, which is the bidder support program proposal.
So Rob Vetsky has to catch a plane, you're saying?
No, Rob Fish.
Rob Fish.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here for the duration. If you need to move it farther down, that's fine.
Is that what you're asking, Christine?
Yes. Yep. I think that's
Okay.
on the agenda next anyhow, isn't it?
We can move Ikuda update to do the bead update first. So we're gonna take item 8, bead update and intro to needs-based program. Lucy
Yes.
and Rob Fish.
Yep.
Sure. Thank you for discussing this today. As you heard from FX, BEAD is a complicated program. The point of this proposal that's in your board packet, and Karen can share it on the screen, I believe, is to make sure we have a competitive process that's open to all types of applicants. There are many applicants that are going to face challenges when it comes to BEAD. This includes the letter of credit issue. This includes the match issue. This includes the issues of just being.
Hang
able
on,
to-
Rob. We have a
Sure.
sheet.
Sure.
Sharing- you're sharing your screen. I don't know if you mean to.
I'm not sharing mine.
Yeah, and before you go, let me just put another intro to this. This is the program you've already approved
Yeah,
in the budget.
let's not share the screens.
Yeah, this is a
Just stop.
this is a program you've.
Wait a second, wait. Okay. I'm being like bombarded by screen weirdness, so.
Yeah,
so-
that's why I'm
That
slowing it
wasn't-
down here, Holly.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
I just want to slow things down because of the screen weirdness, but just let me do the intro and then I'll turn it over to Rob. That, the board approved $1 million in the budget for what we call a CUD assistance program. That's not going to be acceptable, and that comes out of the BEAD budget. The BEAD budget requires a competitive bidding program, so we're really required to help all bidders here. So you've already approved the line item. This is really to approve the grant program. And Rob, now take it from there.
Sure. We don't need to share the screen here, and don't worry about it. So what we did is we made it a needs-based program that's open to applicants that are going to have trouble participating. The idea is we put some funding out there, which results in better applications, that results in collaboration, that results in partnerships, that results in these applicants finding a way forward, since they are limited by conditions such as the letter of credit and the match within BEAD. So that is what this proposal is. It's rebranded. We just provided an outline, scoring criteria. It's not an RFP at this point. We felt it was easier to just give you the highlights than to have you review thousands of words of state policy that has to be in every RFP.
Yeah, this is about the terms of the RFP.
Yeah, so we
would
worked back.
expect it to- yeah.
We went back and forth with the NTIA, and this approach is acceptable. An approach that only gives it out to one type of applicant is not.
Rob, could you share what page in the board book this outline is stated in?
It's page 165, Holly.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy to share my screen if it would help, but it's kind of just words and not graphics. So I think it's probably better if people look it up on their own, if you don't mind. It's on page 165.
Yeah, and
I got it rolled into the grant application, sorry.
okay, and I think I need to start over on this because I'm thoroughly confused. I don't know what we're being asked of.
Okay,
Yeah, what's the
you have approved of a line item in the budget as part of the 2024 budget. It was $1 million to provide CUD assistance for applying for the BEAD program. It's a very complex program. In discussing this with the NTIA, they would not accept money dedicated for the CUDs directly. They because it's a competitive bidding program, we're supposed to treat all bidders equally, including the private telecom carriers.
Oh, this is what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, when we look at this, there are going to be small telecom providers as well as CUDs that are going to need assistance on how to get through these BEAD applications.
And
So that-
individual towns potentially that
And
want to go a
individual
more
towns.
public route or work
So,
with CUD.
so this falls within Act 71, our requirement to provide technical assistance. And it also falls now within BEAD to provide that technical assistance equally to all bidders who need it.
Can I ask why we call it needs-based?
Well, it's needs-based based on the fact that there's certain conditions within the BEAD program that make it more difficult for certain applicants to fully participate. So this is trying to respond to those problems.
So is the need of the applicant or the need based in the BEAD program? I think what you're saying is if you've got a lot of money, you won't need help, but if you don't, you might.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not just money, it's access to a letter of credit, for instance.
So, and what is the board being asked to approve here?
For us to be able to launch this program in the next month or so.
Yeah, and we
So-
also told you this is a fulfillment of my commitment to you during the budget process. We mentioned this during the budget process that this $1 million we may need to change. And in fact, you may not even need to approve this program, but I guess that's really for Tony to make the call. But we did tell you during the budget process that we would come back to you if we needed to change this. You approved of it as a CUD assistance program. So in good faith, we're coming back to you saying, we're changing this to a bidder program. That line item doesn't change. The amount doesn't change. And my understanding from the board previously is, we had that authority, but I just want to make sure we've informed the board and you've been given the opportunity to either vote on it or give us feedback that it's within our purview.
So pardon me, Patty, I'm going to ask one last question. So the nut of the question is whether the board has any objections to this being a bidder type program as a right?
Yes,
Instead of just matching criteria. Yeah. Okay. I'm cool. I don't think we need to review that, Patty, personally, but that's.
I think we should take some sort of action on it. So we've got it on the record that we're changing the structure around this. Questions I have, Christine, are you going to communicate this to all the CUDs so they're aware of the change and the?
Yes.
It'll be sent to all the CUDs. It'll also be sent to all non-CUD towns and posted where required. And we want to get the word out about this.
Okay, so it hasn't been, have you talked to Vikuda about it? You could get feedback from Vikuda?
We talked to Vikuda. We have been open about this in some of our calls as we've been gathering feedback on the BEAD program. Rob V's right on here right now. They were supportive of the effort.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm that. I want to make sure this has been vetted and we're not going to push something through that Vikuda says, oh, wait, time out, we've got concerns.
Yeah, Rob V, maybe you could
So
speak to it.
we definitely support this. I do have a couple comments on implementation that were part of my comments today, but we definitely support it. We understand the constraints that VCBB is under related to this money coming from the NTIA planning grant, and that for them to do this with it, this is what they're going to have to do. So that's fine. But just quickly, our comments were about how long is going to be open, how long do you have to respond. We prefer it to be competitive, not first come, first serve. Like, give us a date where all applicants need to be in and then score them, not first come, first serve.
That was the plan, yes.
Some of the CUDs would prefer this to be an upfront as opposed to a reimbursement based, if you have that discretion. And then, of course, we would like the RFP when it goes out to describe what happens if you're oversubscribed and you need more than $1 million. Are you going to negotiate down with individuals, or are you going to pick the winners? So, just real clarity in terms of the program, like most RFPs that you issue.
Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. Holly?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that, in Act 71, it attempted to have the board, the VCBB board, consider competing grant applications. And in fact, we took a different tack. We allocated funding and we qualified grant applications as they came in. The problem I see with straight up competition in any grant application process here is that we're talking about what the people of Vermont get in the end. And if all the winning grants aggregate I know this is going to be a criterion, geographic distribution, but I'm hopeful that you'll make it competition plus other things. Because it could be that a lesser grant in an underserved area deserves funding, or support of an application through this particular program. Thanks. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. We're actually threading
Yes.
the needle on that, and we're definitely following that. Your train of thought there.
All right, Christine, how would you like to proceed on this? Would you like some sort of action from the board?
No, I don't think I need a resolution for the board. I want you just to, if there's
Okay.
any, you know, the three board members here, if you have any reluctance, let us know. But I do not think, based on the authority given before, that we need a resolution on this. We're just following through on our
Okay.
commitment to inform.
So I
the
just
board.
want to, I want to make sure the minutes reflect
Yep.
that we heard a proposal from staff to change the $1 million, the $1 million allocated in the budget for sub-application assistance to, rather than be restricted to just CUDs, that it's open to anybody in the state, and it's going to be a bid process with date certain bidding and an RFP process. I just want to be clear in the record that that's what's stated, and that's there's no action being taken by the board, but that is being, you seem head nodding, saying, yes, go forward and do this.
Yep, from your mouth to print, since we take notes from the recording.
So Holly?
Patty, what I also heard was that this change was based on direction from the funding agency. I mean, we didn't invent this change. It was
Yes,
more or less a requirement.
exactly. Thank you. That's very good to have that in the record as well.
Yep, we will include that.
Excellent.
I
Okay,
know Lucy had a few more things related to BEAD. So
Okay.
I'll pass it on to her and I'll go catch my flight. Thank you, everybody.
yeah, have a
Thanks,
good flight,
Rob.
Rob.
Thanks. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of make sure we're all on the same page with timeline for the BEAD 5-year plan and initial proposal. So for the BEAD 5-year plan, the public comment period has closed. We are sending our final, we received, I believe 8 different entities, 7 different entities gave us public comments, and they were all very great comments. We were able to incorporate most of them. We are sending our final edits to the graphic designer today, and it's kind of a difficult process working with the designer where we are required to format everything and get it there days in advance. So we are coming up on August 28th is the date that's due to the NTIA. I believe the last item of this agenda is to confirm the special meeting date where you will vote on that plan. And just, very please, if there's anything that you would like to discuss about the plan, please email me or call me. I'm happy to meet, but really today or tomorrow, because the public comment period has closed. By the time it comes to a vote, it's not going to be possible to go back and forth with the designer. So please get me comments if you have any upfront. And then I see Holly is trying to say something. You're muted though.
And now I've unmuted, so it'll be easier to do that. Thank you, Lucy, for the heads up. Patty, one of the things I'm really worried about, and Lucy, maybe you can comment on this, is we're in the process of devising some policy, making some policy decisions. And the BEAD plan could in fact make for us certain policy objectives permanent. And so I'm concerned, and I'm alerting my fellow board members that there is policy embedded in planning. And I'm reliant on you, Lucy, to look down the road to the next phase and say, or is there another point in this process in which grant process allows us to inject policy?
Yeah, that's a good question, Holly. So the BEAD 5-year plan would not be the place where the BEAD 5-year plan is high level enough that the kind of policy that's in the 5-year plan is at the level of, the board mission, the kind of like think Act 71 level, as far as there's nothing in the 5-year plan that, from my perspective, that is setting policy beyond what the state has clearly made as our direction with broadband over and over again for many years. I think if in your review of the plan you have found areas that contradict that, I would definitely like to have a conversation about that in the next couple of days. But that's my impression, is that the initial proposal, volume 2, which is going to be submitted in the fall, would be the place where more of the nitty-gritty of how the program is run gets worked out. But again, that's very much my impression. Please talk to me in the next day or so if there's something that in your review of the plan you've found that raises concern. So the next kind of timeline date I wanted to talk about is the initial proposal, volume 1, which again is not kind of setting up the program for selecting subgrantees, but it involves the challenge process of how we're going to modify the FCC map to work for our BEAD program in Vermont. And then it also includes a few kind of general high level components, and that the public comment period for initial proposal volume 1 closes this Friday. So we're also asking board comments by this Friday so that we can work on incorporating them. And our plan is to have that at the regular September meeting up for a vote. So we'll, assuming we're able to get board comments and public comments by this Friday, we will work to incorporate those and have that ready for the regular packet schedule and up on the September meeting for a vote.
Okay.
And then I will be providing an update as to the initial proposal volume 2 timing at the coming meetings, but it will be, once we get through initial proposal volume 1, be looking pretty shortly for looking for feedback on volume 2 after that.
Patty, can I make a very administrative suggestion here? It would be really great. So I hear these 2 big important documents are coming to us in September. I'm guessing they're going to be kind of voluminous, although beautiful. I would like to suggest that our board book not incorporate those page by page, but that they be posted with a link so that we can access them through a link. And that, for me, helps me from getting lost as I did today in the book.
That works.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. I suspected this was coming. As our board packets get thicker and thicker, we have, that's of course.
Yeah, thanks.
If that works.
Thank you. That was all on my timeline update.
Great, thank you. Okay, anything else on the BEAD update?
Nothing else, right?
Okay, can we hear from, do the Vicuda update, item 7 from Rob?
Great, thank you. The first thing I wanted to do was let you know that with the support of the Northern Borders Grant, Vicuda has a new program manager who joined us this morning. Andrew, I don't know if you can turn your camera on, and you probably have to actually say something out loud for people to see your face. But there he is. Andrew joined us this morning. And Andrew, do you want to just give 2 seconds, the very short version of who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you guys so much for having me. My name's Andrew. I come from a banking background, but I studied in school economic development and a variety of areas related to public policy. Really excited to be a part of the team. I grew up in a rural community myself, so I'm very passionate about this particular project. And I love Vermont, so I'm very stoked to be joining the team and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Andrew. So we're very excited about that, and he and I are already starting to figure out what things we can send his way, and I expect you're going to see more of Andrew in the future for too. My second comment was just that the first half of this meeting, I think, was remarkable, and I mean that in a positive way, actually. Look, this is really hard stuff, and I think there were some things that were surprises, frankly, that it would be. I'm sure there are going to be some folks trying to figure out kind of how we got there, but it was also really transparent and thoughtful, and so I appreciate that. And obviously, Brian having a family emergency it is completely unpredictable and could happen to any of us at any time. So, no energy whatsoever about that, and I hope he's well and his family as well. But one thing I would ask is, to the extent the board and the staff could help map out what the next few months look like as this policy. I know it's in the parking lot for us to talk about the working groups around policy. And try to provide some predictability about what that looks like. I think it would help the CDs with decision making. And so that would be my one kind of constructive comment on the first half of the meeting is, okay, so now that we're in this place, what do we do to provide some predictability in terms of those policies and going forward? And I know that we asked for more time. And so to get those policies right. So now bringing the two together, I think, is important. On the early comments about the flood reallocation, obviously, we understand the real damage that was done in a number of communities and the importance of finding funds to help people. And so I think a lot of folks said, of course, they needed to do this and understood that part of it. But clearly we are in a less secure position than we were in terms of availability of match funds. And I think it's going to be really important that we find a way together, all of us, and I heard it in what your comments were, so I think you're on the same page, to highlight how important those funds are and that they are very much a part of the story about how the CDs are going to participate in BEAD. And it's not optional to return those funds. So we agree with you that we need to very carefully pursue that. We've filed comments on the 5-year action plan. We understand from Lucy and the team that a number of those were positively received, almost all of them. And so we're looking forward to seeing the next draft with those included. I agree with the comment that the 5-year action plan is very high level. The volume 1 that we're going to see and that we're providing comments on by this Friday has some issues in it, but really saving time for thoughtful review of volume 2 remains a very high priority. It is it is the equivalent of writing an Act 71. It describes how we're going to spend $230 million. And so that 1 month comment period feels awful tight in terms of being able to get that right. I'm going to keep saying that until we get it right. And then I guess the last comment was just also as an outcome of the Northern Borders Grant, DECUDA issued an RFP last week for identifying a senior resource with experience in financial services and human resources. And our plan is that we will identify an individual to lead the development of shared services requirements in those two areas, and to lead kind of further RFPs and procurements to help identify contractors that can help the CUDs kind of normalize and equalize and come to some common shared services for the future. We're really excited about getting that underway as well. And obviously having Andrew here to help implement that program will be really helpful. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Holly, you have your hand up?
Once again, so Rob, I have just two little things to say, but one has nothing to do with you. Because I was required to be 5 minutes late to start this meeting, I didn't hear that Brian was absent due to a family emergency. So my apologies for casting shade on him. It is the case, however, that we're a board with some people who are incredibly busy and very engaged, and I'm grateful for their expertise and their engagement. But we really have some pretty serious work to do here, and it really puts the board at risk when we have people coming in and out. So I have to hold both of those things in mind at the same time. So when I heard about your RFP for financial and human resource services, I always hate putting together the money and the people as one big category of resource, but I want to clear a little clarification. Are you saying that you're doing an RFP that would then be replicated so that each CUD can do their own RFP for a person? Or are you saying that there would be a central resource?
No, and I've worked in organizations that have HR under finance, and I've worked in organizations that don't. And I agree with you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We recognize the difference in the two portfolios. But the first step was that, given my expertise in time and Andrew's and thing was to identify a leader who could lead the program of looking at chart of accounts, looking at accounting systems, looking at policies, who understood that and was a real expert, who could help us find the experts that we're going to bring on for the shared service. So we don't think one person can do that, but we think one person can lead it.
Okay, so you're finding a leader to find the service providers that will be shared.
Right, they'll be shared, exactly.
I see. That's helpful.
And that will be for both the HR and the financial services portfolio. We do have a contractor that actually CV Fiber and Ray helped bring on board, PFM, who's helping with some of the financing issues around, for instance, bonding or private loans and other things. But this is more about the accounting, and as you think about ARPA requirements, in some cases, RDOF and Rural Utility Service, RUS requirements, and now BEAD, all those complicated accounting rules. How do we make sure that we, to the maximum extent we can, do it the same way and leverage each other's expertise? And same for HR policies.
That's helpful explanation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anything else of Rob? Okay, let's go on then. Let's move to public comment is next on our agenda.
Okay, we'll take that. The rules for public comment is we'll recognize you in order and 3 minutes each. But of course, Laura has her hand up. So Laura, you're not public, so you're not restricted to those rules.
You're muted, Laura.
Sorry, may I ask Rob one question?
Absolutely.
I don't know if he's still with us or maybe he left. Yes. Rob, anything that the CUDs the CUDs would prioritize for the board here? In terms of work that would be helpful for us to get done for you all?
So how the development of these policies come together and allow the ARPA funded activities to move forward, and how we align them with BEAD clearly are volume 2. So is clearly on our minds. And I'm not sure we fully understand yet how they come together, because there's a lot of work that obviously, due to it being a competitive grant, we haven't seen. But figuring out some kind of predictable timetable to get us through the comment period for BEAD volume 2 and get these policies in place, I think would be really helpful to help, to help us. And again, there's some piece of that we can't know and we don't want to know, because we want to be in this competitive process that BEAD's going to establish. But, staff and board working together to figure out and disclose kind of an integrated, the draft volume, the draft 5-year action plan in volume 1 have timetables in them for BEAD. Meshing that with the broader set of activities that the board has related to the policies and how that leads us to success this fall, I think would be really helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll recognize Irv Tomei. Irv, go ahead.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the board for approving the construction grant for EC Fiber. I did not actively participate in developing that application, and so I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate and thank FX and all the people involved in our team who developed that proposal, especially calling out Treasurer Dan and accounting help at GWI Vermont. I'm blanking on names, having a senior moment. At the risk of perhaps getting it wrong, I just wanted to try to, I haven't had a prior discussion with FX about this, but I'm going to risk a clarification. I think his point about BEAD is one of timeliness, that except for aspects of affordability, which are extremely important and where I share Holly's and FX's concern about affordability, I think that what FX is saying, that when it comes to construction help, the bureaucratic processes involved in BEAD are going to be so time consuming that funds will not flow from it in a sufficiently timely fashion to help, at least for EC Fiber, complete our construction plans, and may well be too slow for some of the other CUDs as well. And I've gone out on a limb here. I'm guessing that's what he meant. Thank you.
Thanks, Irv. Anybody else have a comment? I don't see any other hands up at this point, but oh, there we go. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hey, thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to close out to make sure I was on the same page with this understanding. So Lamile FiberNet, thank you for approving the pre-construction grant, and we'd like to take up your suggestion to come back to you. Ideally in 2 weeks, as soon as you're ready, we'll be ready. But we're a public body too, so our board couldn't meet today. We have to warn that and have a discussion. But look, we'd like to work this out. So, and are eager to do so on behalf of our constituents. So whenever you schedule it, we'll be there.
Thank you. Laura, your hand is up next.
Thank you. I could just say ditto. Thank you. Lisa, yeah, Otter Creek is in the same situation, and we will definitely meet as a board, and absolutely, we want to keep the train running and rolling, and want to get our fiber built to our constituents. So I'm whenever you get it scheduled, of course, I know staff will let us know. We'll be happy to get back and continue this discussion and hopefully get to agreement. Yay. And thank you for the award of the pre-construction grant. Thank you. I didn't mean to have 2 hands raised. There it goes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we can move to the next agenda item.
Okay, next on our agenda is the parking lot and specifically subcommittee assignments. Obviously, we have very important work ahead of us so that we can clarify what these policies are going to look like. We don't want to hold up the CUDs in any way, but we do have to get these policies checked and worked on. So what I did, my takeaway from the last meeting was to identify the subcommittees, the tasks and the subcommittees, and I put together a one-page document that's in our packet on page 166.
I think you're still sharing your screen. I don't know
Yep.
if others are.
Yep, got it.
So
Thank
on
you.
page 166 of our packets is the subcommittee task list. The idea here is to make sure, A, that I have all the subcommittees that we talked about, and then B, to assign people for the subcommittees, and then to initiate that work. C is to initiate the work to get things rolling. You'll see in each of the subcommittees, I've listed VCUDA as part of it. And I know, Rob, you can't be in every place and everywhere. But that said, what we want to do is make sure we have a very inclusive process. We want your feedback. We want suggestions from the CUDs, VCUDA, and others. So what I'd like to do is walk through this list and try to identify who should be on the subcommittees. Holly?
This is going to, this may not sit well, but I need to say that the leader of these groups needs to be a board member in each and every case. And this is board policy. We can't delegate this. So while I appreciate that Christine will be welcome in every group, she cannot be the leader, in my mind, of any group. And I think that that's essential.
So who would we put? I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to put a board member on each of these.
And I guess I should also say that this is not a list of the proposed policies. So these committees will need to address these issues, but should also come back to the board with a proposed policy that includes these issues. Okay. So I think we need to divvy up these subcommittees among us, and every board member gets some work.
So since Brian is not here, shall we assign him to
the hardest one?
The grantee agreement?
Yeah.
There you go.
And then who do we propose for liens?
I would take it since it's a legal issue.
Happy to have you.
I'll get plenty of feedback.
Happy to have you take that. And I think Tony ought to be on that one as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Excellent suggestion. So from the top, construction standards. What I'd like to do is solicit feedback for what CUDs would want to participate in this subcommittee, and VCUDA, who from VCUDA would represent on the subcommittee. Rob, if you're still on, I'd love to have you jump in here.
Yeah, I think if you would be so kind as to let us have our 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow where we have everyone assembled, we could probably come back to you with a list tomorrow.
Excellent. That'd be great. And the other thing that I would like to urge you, and especially I'm going to speak directly to Lisa from Lamoille, if anybody has a suggestion for what this particular task or subcommittee item should look like, please present it to us. Lisa, you've done tremendous work, and I would love to lift best practices from the work that you've done. There's no reason for us to recreate if you've got a really viable consumer standards approach. Let's have it, and that can become something that we can react to. So I'd really encourage you, anything that you can provide to help us to move this ship along would really speed the approach. Holly?
And that that comment made me realize that we've omitted an affordability subcommittee. And I know that because I was asked to do that.
Okay,
Um,
all right. Holly, I'm gonna put you on that as well.
Oh, goodness. Yes. The other thing I would mention is it's not that we're limited to board members, staff, and CUDs, but there may be experts that could join us for the purpose of developing these policies. You know, we may want to tag the folks over at Primer and Piper to do a little bit of pro bono work in supporting some of this conversation, just as an example.
I think that'd be fabulous if we can leverage their skill sets, and I completely support that. And Christine, if you have staff members that you'd want to assign to each of these committees, you know, do some thinking on that, but let's plan for sooner than later so that we can get this kicked off and move the policy discussion along. I don't want to hold things up, as I said.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate you put my names on here and then I'll delegate it. We'll have a discussion with staff. You know, we have our weekly staff meeting and we'll come up with names from staff. For example, there's definitely better, you know, there's people with expertise in some of these areas that I would assign rather than myself.
Okay. All right. And what I'd like to do is specifically list the staff members that would be good for each of the groups.
Yep.
So that we can have, that way we're just, nobody's missed. We set up these subcommittees.
And the board person that's in charge of the subcommittee knows who to call.
Exactly.
Yep, I will give those names to you by the end of the day, Friday. Is that adequate?
That would be fantastic. And what I can do is pull all that together. Rob Vetsky, if you send me suggestions for your end, I'll put that on the list. I'll circulate that on Monday, and I'm going to challenge each of the committee members to get a meeting by next week and get rolling on this. Okay.
Laura, I'm going to say to you that I would, if you don't volunteer to also join me on affordability, I'm going to be calling you anyway.
I'm happy to join you on affordability.
Thank you.
All right, Laura's on.
Yeah, whatever you want to assign me, Patty, but there are definitely
Okay.
some that would be better than others.
Okay. All right, like I said, on Monday, I will get out a revised list and early in the day, and we'll get moving on this.
Thanks, Patty.
Okay.
I did hear out loud Rob Vetsky's plea to have some sort of timeline built. And so while you're thinking about this, Patty, maybe you would also do us the favor of setting some benchmarks for, you know, I thought that Dan's suggestion that we might come back in 2 weeks with all of our policies in place sounded like a real headbender, but perhaps you would take a shot at a proposed timeline. I think the CUD's proposed timeline at the end of the year is way long, way too long.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, people need to know what they're doing before then.
Okay, let me take a shot at kind of a Gantt chart of steps and what the expectations would be.
Great.
Okay. Christine, anything else on the parking lot to highlight?
No, that's it. That's what we have in the parking lot. So thank you.
Okay. I will update you. I've got a draft started of the communication documents. We called it ex parte communication, basically documents coming in after a board packet's been submitted. I will be submitting a recommendation for the next meeting on that in consultation with Tony, with some advice from Tony on that. So that's in the works.
I went on along those lines, Patty. Perhaps we should note that today we received, I think it was today, some communication from on the Lamoille application from NetGo. No, what's the I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you received an updated ESA.
Oh, GoNet.
GoNet,
Oh, the
that's-
GoNet.
GoNet.
Oh,
My-
that's
my
GoNet.
apologies. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you're doing that work of setting some standards for that. We
Thank
did
you.
we did make an inquiry into overbuild, so I think we procedurally addressed part of the question, but we also haven't ruled on the grant.
All right.
We got a hand up. Maureen Hopkins, Patty.
All right. Maureen, we can recognize you under public comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to address Holly's comment. The comments that we sent were in regard to Otter Creek's application, not Lamoille.
My apologies.
No problem. Just wanted to
I
clarify.
was
Thank you.
wondering how Addison figured into Lamoille's contract. So you fixed that for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, with that, is there anything else to discuss on the parking lot or anything before we go into an executive session?
Patty, could we just confirm our special meeting date now and then go into executive session
Yes,
so we don't have
please.
any action?
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I will take that. We have the doodle poll. I will share the screen. Looks like there's no date that'll work for all board members, but let me share the screen.
And remind us, Christine, this is for the purpose of going over the BEAD.
Yes, final approval of the BEAD program, the version 1
5-year
of the
plan.
submittal. Yep.
Yeah, the 5-year plan.
Yep. So what we have here is you'll see that we have everybody can make the 25th date from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, except for Holly.
6 to 7? What are you talking,
Yes.
AM or PM?
PM.
Is that a
Christine?
weekend?
Look, can I just interject? I think your computer may be on a different.
Oh, well,
That's
take it away.
time zone?
Would you take it
It
away
is.
then?
It's in Switzerland. I see it,
Is
Christine.
it okay if I share?
I
my
want to go to
screen?
Switzerland for the meeting.
Yeah, I don't, this doodle does that to me and I'm not sure why.
I was
Let
like,
me see-
I am
let me
not
see.
meeting from 6 to 7. I have too many night meetings already.
So I
Hey, I
think
was-
the problem is there were no dates that all board members could make, and there were 3 dates that it's a little confusing here because Rob organized the doodle, so he automatically shows up. But so where it says 5, it's really dates that 4 board members could make.
Can you
So-
share your screen on this doodle poll? Because I can't figure out how to get it out of Zurich time.
I think I am
It's out of
sharing
Zurich
my
time.
screen.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
I think
great, great,
yeah.
great.
So
Thank you.
Lucy, can you identify any date in which everybody but Groschner can attend so I could confirm to you? Because I might be able to.
Okay, Friday,
I'm-
August 25th from 12 to 1 or 1 to 2. If you could make either of those times, then we would have a full board.
It looks from 12 to 1 or 1 to 2 on August 25th.
Correct.
As of today, so this, I had a change in calendar. So as of today, I can make either of those times.
Oh,
Okay,
perfect.
then that is the missing link. Thank you, Holly.
So
Um,
what's your pleasure, Patty? 12 to 1 or 1 to 2?
Let's do 12. Let's do 12 to 1. It's a Friday.
Okay,
Perfect.
consider it done. We'll get the warning out.
Excellent. And then our next regular meeting is September 11th.
That's correct.
Let me see the calendar. Okay, anything else in public session before we move to executive session? Christine?
Nope, nothing else. When we go into executive session, I'd like to request Tony to join me as well. Tony
Okay,
Clifford.
Holly, anything else before we go?
No, in fact, I was just going to make the executive session motion. I move that we move to executive session for the purpose of considering personnel matters, and that we invite staff members Christine Hallquist and Tony Clitheroe.
Yep.
Yeah,
Clitheroe.
Clitheroe. Was there anyone else? I think Rob Fish was initially considered, but he's on a plane. So just 2 people.
Rob is still here and would like to attend.
I am still here on the plane. I can do more listening, but I'm just going to be available to answer any clarifying questions since I did some of the process. I may have to go at any time though. So please do invite me if that's possible.
Is there an executive session meeting, or how are we doing this?
Link.
I can move you all into executive session, so it should all be seamless, hopefully.
Wow.
Okay. So Holly, can you
Swell.
change your motion to reference 1 VSA 313 paragraph A3?
Amendment accepted.
Okay, second, I will second Holly's motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Ayes carry. Okay, we can move to executive session.
Okay, take it away, Heron.
Okay, you should move in a matter of seconds.
Oh my gosh, nice job. Looks like it's working.
Tony, you're not going?
I thought I was in. I
I
just,
thought you were too.
I accepted.
Yeah, you're not. You're still here. So let me see what's going on here. You are supposed to be in there. That's interesting. I see you're in there, but you're not in there.
There, it says executive session. I'm
Tony,
going
at
to-
the top of your screen. Oh, she got it.
Did she go? Okay, good. And is Rob in there as well? Because I didn't see him on the list. But
It looks
he's
like
not.
everyone's
Everyone's there.
No, I don't see.
I don't see him here, and he
Let
hasn't spoken
me
up.
try to.
Rob, are you still here? I think he's there.
It seems like maybe he jumped. Maybe he's in either. He might have gone on his plane.
Did he go? Okay. Well, we can chat him, and we will stop the recording here until they are back.
And just for everyone still on the line, when the board comes back, they